Cal Mackenzie's horse stumbled in the Montana snow, going down hard. He hit the frozen ground and tasted blood. 4 years of running, and this was how it ended, freezing to death on Christmas morning alone like he deserved. Then he heard them. 2 small voices cutting through the blizzard. "Mister, please don't die yet." He opened his eyes. Twin girls stood at a fence line, hands gripped tight on the rails. "We prayed for someone brave," the second girl whispered. "Are you him?" Cal tried to answer. Couldn't. His horse wasn't getting up. Neither was he. Before we continue this story, I need to ask you something important. If this opening grabbed your heart, hit that subscribe button right now. This is a 2-hour journey about broken people finding each other when they need it most. I promise you this story goes places you won't expect. And comment below. Tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Cal and Abby's story travels. Now let's get back to that frozen cowboy and those 2 little girls who just might save his life. The taller girl moved first. She climbed through the fence rails with the kind of careful determination that spoke of a child who'd learned to handle emergencies alone. "Rose, get Mama. Tell her a man's down." The second twin ran toward the cabin, her small boots kicking up snow. Cal tried to sit up, failed. His vision blurred at the edges, and he knew that meant trouble. He'd seen men freeze to death in the war. It started with the shaking, then came the drowsiness, and then you just stopped caring about living. "Don't you close your eyes, mister." The girl's voice was sharp. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old, but she spoke like someone who'd already buried people and wouldn't allow it to happen again. "You hear me? Don't you dare." "Horse," Cal managed. His tongue felt thick. "Need to. Your horse is done. You ain't. Now stay awake." She pulled off her coat, too thin for this weather, patched in 3 places, and tried to cover his chest with it. The gesture was so futile and so brave that Cal felt something crack inside his frozen chest. A woman's voice cut through the wind. "Lily, get back from him." "But Mama, he's freezing." "I said get back." Cal forced his eyes to focus. The woman approaching through the snow moved with the kind of controlled urgency that marked frontier competence. She was young, maybe 30, wearing a dress that had seen better years and a shawl that wasn't nearly warm enough. Her face carried the sharp intelligence of someone who'd learned to assess threats quickly and accurately. She knelt beside him, her hands quick and efficient as she checked his pulse, his breathing the color of his skin. "Can you stand?" "Don't think so, ma'am." "Then we'll have to drag you. Lily, get his other arm. Rose, run ahead and open the barn door." "Barn," Cal tried to protest. "Don't want to impose." "You'll impose plenty by dying in my front yard and traumatizing my daughters further." Her voice was crisp. "Now shut up and help us help you." Between the woman and the child, they got him upright. Cal's legs barely functioned, and each step toward the barn felt like pushing through deep water. His horse lay still in the snow behind them, and he felt a stab of grief for the animal that had carried him through 4 years of running. The barn was small, but well maintained. The woman and Lily hauled him to a corner where hay bales were stacked, and they lowered him onto them with surprising gentleness. "Lily, get every blanket from the storage trunk. Rose, stoke the stove in the cabin and heat water. Move." The girls scattered. Cal tried to speak, to thank her, to apologize for the trouble, but his teeth were chattering too hard to form words. The woman wrapped blankets around him with practiced efficiency, then started removing his boots. Her hands were red from cold, but steady. "Your horse." Cal shook his head. "I'm sorry." She said it simply, without false comfort. "Good horses are hard to lose." "Had him since Kansas City." "Long way from Kansas City." "Long way from everywhere, ma'am." She studied his face with the kind of direct assessment that made most men uncomfortable. Cal met her eyes and saw intelligence there, and wariness, and something that might have been calculation. "You running from the law?" "No, ma'am." "Running from something, though?" It wasn't a question. Cal didn't answer. "I'm Abigail Thornton. Those are my daughters Lily and Rose. This is my homestead such as it is. You're welcome to shelter until the storm breaks, but I need to know you're not bringing trouble to my door." "No trouble, Mrs. Thornton. Just a man who made some bad choices about traveling in December." That much is obvious. She stood brushing hay from her skirt. "I'll bring you hot coffee and food. Don't try to move yet. Your body needs time to warm up properly, or you'll shock your heart." She was halfway to the barn door when Cal found his voice. "Why'd you help me?" Abigail Thornton turned back, and her expression held something that looked like old grief. "Because my husband died alone in the cold, and nobody helped him. I won't have that on my conscience twice." She left before Cal could respond. The coffee came an hour later, carried by the serious twin Lily. She approached him with the caution of a child who'd learned not to trust strangers automatically. "Mama says drink this slow. Says if you drink it fast, you'll just throw it up." Cal accepted the tin cup with hands that still trembled. "Your mama's a smart woman." "Smartest in Montana territory, probably." Lily sat on a hay bale across from him, studying him with eyes that seemed far too old for her face. "You got a name, mister?" "Caleb Mackenzie. Most folks call me Cal." "You got family, Cal?" The question hit harder than she could have known. "Not anymore. They die. Lily Marie Thornton." Abigail's voice came from the barn door. "We don't interrogate guests about their dead. You said asking questions was how we stay safe." Lily's tone was defensive, but not disrespectful. "There's asking questions and there's being rude. You know the difference." Lily stood clearly dismissed. She paused at the door. "For what it's worth, Mr. Cal, I'm glad you didn't die. Would have been a terrible Christmas if you had." After she left, Abigail approached with a plate of food beans, cornbread, and what looked like venison. The meal was simple, but carefully prepared. "I apologize for Lily. She's taken on too much responsibility since her father passed. Sometimes she forgets she's 8 years old. She's got a good heart. She's got a frightened heart pretending to be brave." Abigail handed him the plate. "Eat, then sleep if you can. Storm's getting worse, so you'll be here at least through tomorrow." Cal ate slowly, aware that his stomach needed time to adjust. The food was good, better than good. It carried the kind of care that spoke of someone who valued dignity even in poverty. "Your husband," Cal said carefully. "You said he died in the cold. Was that recent?" Abigail's expression closed like a door slamming. 18 months ago. Mining accident, they said. I have my own opinions about that." Meaning my husband was a surveyor, not a miner. Meaning he was investigating land fraud when he died. And meaning Judge Cyrus Blackwood declared it an accident before any real investigation happened. The bitterness in her voice was sharp enough to cut. Cal recognized it, the anger of someone who'd watched injustice prevail and been powerless to stop it. "I'm sorry for your loss, ma'am." "Everyone's sorry. Sorry doesn't bring him back. Sorry doesn't keep the judge from trying to steal my land. Sorry doesn't feed my daughters, or keep them warm, or stop the town from looking at me like I'm one step away from the poorhouse and moral degradation." She stopped abruptly, her cheeks flushing. "Forgive me. I don't usually burden strangers with our troubles." "Maybe that's the problem. Maybe you need someone to burden." Abigail laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Mr. Mackenzie, I learned a long time ago that the only person I can rely on is myself. Expecting help from others is just setting yourself up for disappointment." She left before Cal could argue. He woke to children's voices outside the barn. Through the gaps in the walls, he could see that the storm had eased. Pale winter sunlight filtered through high clouds, making the snow glitter like scattered diamonds. Cal stood slowly, testing his legs. The warmth and rest had helped. He was stiff and sore, but functional. Through the barn door, he could see the twins building something in the snow. A snowman, maybe? Or a fort? Rose saw him first. Her face lit up with the kind of uncomplicated joy that children brought to simple things. "Lily, he's awake. He didn't die." Lily turned, and her assessment was more reserved. "You feeling better, Mr. Cal?" "Much better. Thanks to you and your mama." "It's Christmas," Rose said, as if that explained everything. "Mama says we're having a special dinner tonight. Venison stew and dried apple pie. Will you stay?" Cal hesitated. Every instinct told him to saddle up, except he had no horse and move on before he could get tangled up in other people's problems. He'd spent 4 years avoiding exactly this kind of situation. "Your mama might not want a stranger at her Christmas table." "Mama wants everyone at the table," Rose insisted. "She says Christmas is for family, but also for strangers who need somewhere to belong." "Rose sees the best in everyone," Lily said quietly. "I'm more practical, but she's right about this. Mama would want you to stay." "And what do you want?" Lily met his eyes directly. "I want to know if you're strong enough to help Mama if the judge comes back. I want to know if you'll run away when things get hard, or if you're the kind of man who stays." The challenge in her voice was clear. This child had already lost one father. She wasn't about to trust easily. "Lily, that's not fair," Rose started. "It's a fair question," Cal interrupted. He knelt in the snow so he could look Lily in the eye. "Truth is, I've been running for 4 years. Running from grief, running from memories, running from anything that might make me care again. I'm not sure I'm the staying kind anymore." "Then why'd you stop running last night?" Lily asked. "Why didn't you just keep riding until you froze? Why'd you let us help you?" Cal didn't have a good answer, or rather, he had an answer he wasn't ready to admit. "Maybe I got tired of running." Lily studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded as if he'd passed some test he hadn't known he was taking. "You can stay for Christmas dinner, but after that, you should probably move on. Mama doesn't need another person to worry about." She walked back toward the cabin, leaving Cal with Rose, who looked apologetic. "She's not usually mean. She's just scared." "Scared of what?" "Of losing Mama. The judge keeps saying Mama's not fit to raise us alone. Says we need a proper father and a stable home. Lily's afraid they're going to take us away." The simple statement hit Cal like a gut punch. These children were living with the threat of being torn from the only parent they had left, and they were handling it with more courage than most adults could manage. "That's not going to happen." "How do you know?" "Because your mama's the kind of woman who'd fight heaven and hell to keep you. And I imagine heaven and hell would think twice before taking her on." Rose smiled. It was the first genuinely happy expression he'd seen on her face. "I like you, Mr. Cal. I hope you stay longer than Christmas." She ran off before he could respond, leaving Cal standing in the snow, wondering how he'd managed to get tangled up in this situation after swearing he'd never care about anyone again. Christmas dinner was an exercise in controlled chaos. The cabin was small, one main room with sleeping alcoves curtained off, but Abigail had transformed it into something approaching festive. Candles burned in tin holders. The table was set with mismatched plates that had been carefully arranged. The smell of venison stew filled the space, rich and savory. Cal sat at the head of the table because the twins insisted despite his protests. Lily watched him from across the table with continued wariness. Rose chattered about everything and nothing, and Abigail moved between the stove and the table with efficient grace. "Mr. Mackenzie, would you say grace?" Abigail asked as she served the stew. Cal froze. "Ma'am, I'm not sure I'm the right person." "You're the only adult man at this table. That makes you the right person." There was a challenge in her voice similar to Lily's earlier. These Thornton women didn't make things easy. Cal bowed his head. The words came slowly, rusty from disuse. "Lord, we thank you for this food, for the warmth of this home, and for the kindness of strangers. We ask your blessing on this family, and your protection on these 2 girls. Amen." "Amen," the twins echoed. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. The stew was excellent, better than anything Cal had tasted in months. The cornbread was golden and fluffy. Even the water tasted clean and cold. "Mama," Rose said suddenly, "can we tell Mr. Cal about Papa's horses?" Abigail's expression tightened. "Rose, Mr. Mackenzie doesn't need to hear." "I'd like to hear," Cal interrupted gently. Rose jumped up and ran to the alcove she shared with Lily. She returned with 2 carved wooden horses, their craftsmanship immediately evident even from across the table. "Papa made these before he died. See the manes he carved every single hair." Cal examined the horses with the respect they deserved. The work was extraordinary. Each horse had individual personality carved into the wood, and the detail was museum quality. "Your father was an artist." "He was a surveyor," Abigail said quietly. "But he carved in the evenings, said it helped him think." "These are remarkable, Mrs. Thornton." Thomas believed that beauty mattered even out here, especially out here. Her voice caught slightly. "He said if we were going to build something in this territory, it should be worth building." Lily set down her spoon. "Papa was measuring land boundaries when he died. The judge said it was an accident, but Papa was careful. He wouldn't have gone into a dangerous mine shaft alone." "Lily." Abigail's voice carried a warning. "It's true, Mama. You know it's true." The tension in the cabin thickened. Cal could feel the weight of unspoken grief and anger and helpless frustration that came from knowing truth but being unable to prove it. "Girls," Abigail said carefully, "Mr. Mackenzie doesn't need to hear about our family troubles." "Maybe he does." Lily's voice was steady. "Maybe God sent him here for a reason. God sent him here because he was freezing to death in a blizzard. Or maybe God sent the blizzard to bring him here." Cal watched the exchange with growing understanding. These were 2 intelligent women navigating grief and fear and the complex theology of children trying to make sense of loss. "Lily," Cal said gently, "your mama's right. I'm just a traveler passing through." "But you could stay." Rose's voice was small but hopeful. "You could help Mama. You could—" "Rose, enough." Abigail stood abruptly. "Mr. Mackenzie has his own life and his own troubles. He's not here to solve ours." She began clearing plates with movements that were too quick, too sharp. Cal recognized the defense mechanism. Stay busy, stay moving, don't feel. After dinner, the twins showed him their drawings by firelight. Rose's were fanciful horses with wings, castles made of clouds, gardens that grew jewels instead of vegetables. Lily's were precise maps of the property diagrams of the barn's structure, careful renderings of local wildlife. "You draw like an engineer," Cal told Lily. "Papa taught me. He said understanding how things work means you can fix them when they break." "Smart man, your papa." "He was." Lily set down her pencil. "Mr. Cal, are you a good man or a bad man?" "Lily," Abigail called from across the room. "It's okay," Cal said. He thought about the question seriously. "I've done good things and bad things. I've helped people and I've let people down. I guess that makes me like most folks somewhere in the middle." "Did you ever kill anyone?" "Lily Marie Thornton. That is enough." Abigail crossed the room in 3 strides. "Apologize to Mr. Mackenzie right now." "It's a fair question," Cal said quietly. "Yes, Lily. I killed men during the war. Union Army Scout. It was my job to find Confederate positions and eliminate threats. I'm not proud of it, but I won't lie about it either." Lily nodded slowly. "Papa said war makes people do things they wouldn't normally do. He said, judging soldiers for following orders isn't fair. Your papa was wise. But he's dead, and the judge is alive, so maybe wisdom doesn't matter as much as we think." The bitterness in her voice was heartbreaking. Cal wanted to tell her that wisdom always mattered, that good eventually triumphed over evil, that justice prevailed. But he'd seen too much to believe those comfortable lies. "Bedtime," Abigail announced. "Both of you." Say goodnight to Mr. Mackenzie." Rose hugged him without hesitation. Lily offered a solemn handshake. After they disappeared behind the curtain to their sleeping alcove, Abigail poured 2 cups of coffee and sat across from Cal. "I apologize again for my daughters. They've been through too much, and they're desperate for—" She stopped. "For a father," Cal finished. "I was going to say for security, for someone to make them feel safe again." She wrapped her hands around her cup. "They don't understand that I can't simply conjure up a husband to solve our problems. But the judge is using your unmarried status against you." Abigail's eyes snapped up. "How did you know that?" "Lily mentioned him questioning your fitness as a mother. In my experience, that particular attack usually comes from men who believe women can't manage alone. Judge Blackwood believes many things. That women are property. That land belongs to whoever has the power to take it. That a Confederate veteran deserves to profit from the war he lost." Her voice was hard. "My husband found evidence that the judge has been systematically stealing land from homesteaders for years, moving survey boundaries, altering land office records, using mining accidents to eliminate anyone who got too close to the truth. And your husband got too close." Thomas was meticulous. He kept detailed records, took photographs, documented every discrepancy he found. He planned to take everything to the federal land office in Helena. She paused. "He died 3 days before he was supposed to leave. Where's the evidence now?" "Hidden. The judge tore apart our cabin looking for it after the funeral. But Thomas was smarter than that. He knew this might happen." Cal leaned forward. "Mrs. Thornton, what you're describing is conspiracy to commit murder and systematic land fraud. That's federal crime. Why haven't you gone to the authorities yourself?" "With what proof? Thomas's evidence is useless without his testimony to authenticate it. And I'm just a widow with 2 daughters and a grudge. The judge is a respected pillar of the community with connections reaching to the territorial capital." She laughed bitterly. "Who do you think they'd believe?" "Someone needs to believe you." "Well, it won't be you. Because tomorrow morning you'll saddle up. Oh wait, you don't have a horse. You'll walk away then. And you'll forget about the widow Thornton and her conspiracy theories, and you'll move on to wherever men like you move on to." The accusation stung, because it was probably accurate. Cal had spent 4 years perfecting the art of not caring, of not getting involved, of staying disconnected from other people's problems. "I should get back to the barn," he said. "Yes, you should." But neither of them moved. "Mrs. Thornton, Abigail, why'd you really help me last night?" Truth this time. She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "Because my daughters prayed for someone brave to come help us. And then you appeared literally at our fence line on Christmas morning, and I thought—" She stopped, shaking her head. "I thought maybe God was finally listening." "I'm not brave. I'm a coward who's been running for 4 years. "Running from what?" "My wife and son. They died of cholera while I was away scouting. Came home to an empty house and 2 graves." The words came out flat, emotionless. He'd learned to say them that way. "I've been running ever since because standing still means remembering. And remembering means—" He couldn't finish. "Means feeling," Abigail whispered. "Means letting the grief have you." "Yes. I know that kind of running. I do it too in my own way. Stay busy, stay moving. Don't think too hard about Thomas being gone, or the judge circling like a vulture, or my daughters losing their childhood to fear." She stood. "We're both running, Mr. Mackenzie. The only difference is I can't leave my fence line, so I run in place." Cal walked to the barn through snow that glittered under a clear sky full of stars. Behind him, the cabin glowed with warm light. He could see Abigail's silhouette, moving past the window, banking the fire, preparing for night. He should leave tomorrow, walk to town, buy a horse with what little money he had left, and ride away from this situation before it could sink its hooks any deeper. But Lily's question echoed in his mind. "Are you the kind of man who stays?" Cal didn't know the answer anymore. He bedded down in the hay wrapped in blankets that smelled like Abigail's cabin wood smoke, and dried herbs, and something indefinably feminine. Sleep came slowly. Sometime near dawn, he woke to the sound of horses approaching. Multiple riders moving carefully through the snow. Cal was on his feet instantly, his hand instinctively reaching for the gun he no longer wore. Through the barn's gaps, he could see 3 riders stopping at Abigail's fence line. The lead rider dismounted. Even in the pre-dawn darkness, Cal could see he was well-dressed, expensive coat, good boots. The kind of man who expected the world to accommodate him. The other 2 riders stayed mounted. They had the look of hired muscle thick through the shoulders, guns worn openly. Cal moved to the barn door silently. He couldn't hear the conversation, but he could see Abigail emerge from the cabin shawl, wrapped tight, her posture rigid with tension. The well-dressed man spoke. Abigail shook her head sharply. The man stepped closer. Abigail held her ground. One of the mounted men's hands drifted toward his gun. Cal was through the barn door before conscious thought could stop him. "Problem here, ma'am." All 4 people turned. The well-dressed man's expression shifted from irritation to calculation in a heartbeat. "And who might you be?" "I might be someone who doesn't like seeing 3 armed men intimidating a woman at dawn on Christmas morning." The man smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Judge Cyrus Blackwood, this is official court business, and you're trespassing on property that's under territorial jurisdiction. I suggest you move along before you find yourself in legal difficulty." So this was the judge. Cal studied him, mid-50s, intelligent eyes, the kind of smooth confidence that came from years of getting away with corruption. "I suggest you state your business and leave." The lady said no, which in civilized company means the conversation's over. "Mr. Mackenzie," Abigail said quietly. "Please don't—" "Mrs. Thornton." Blackwood's voice was smooth. "I came as a courtesy to inform you that the territorial court will be hearing a petition regarding your daughter's welfare next week. Given your current living situation, taking in strange men operating a homestead without male supervision, there are concerns about the appropriateness of their environment." "You bastard," Abigail breathed. "I prefer your honor. And I'd watch that tongue, Mrs. Thornton. Profanity isn't behavior befitting a proper mother." Blackwood's smile widened. "Of course, if you were to reconsider my previous offer regarding this property, I'd be happy to advocate for your continued custody. A woman with financial security and proper male guidance would face far less scrutiny." "Get off my land." "This land may not be yours much longer. The survey records show irregularities in your boundary claims. I'd hate to see you lose everything because of your late husband's surveying errors." Blackwood remounted his horse. "You have until next week to reconsider. After that, the court makes its decision." He tipped his hat with mock courtesy. "Merry Christmas, Mrs. Thornton. Mr. Mackenzie, I hope you enjoy your brief stay in Bozeman. I understand strangers rarely linger long." The threat was clear. The 3 riders left at a leisurely pace, confident in their power and position. Abigail stood frozen in the yard, her face pale. When Cal touched her arm, she flinched. "He's going to take them. He's going to take my daughters." "No, he's not. You heard him. The court hearing the custody petition is a bluff designed to force you into selling. He doesn't want your daughters. He wants your land. You don't know that. I know men like him. They use fear as a weapon because it's cheaper and cleaner than actual violence." Cal turned her to face him. "But Abigail, he's not bluffing about the court date. Which means you need help. Real help." "I told you last night I can't—" "I know what you told me. Now I'm telling you something different." Cal took a breath. "I'll stay. Through the court date, through whatever comes after. I'll help you fight this." Abigail stared at him. Why would you do that?" Because 2 small girls had asked God for someone brave, and Cal was tired of being a coward. Because Abigail Thornton deserved someone to stand beside her instead of behind her. Because staying was scarier than running, and maybe it was time to be scared. Because it's Christmas, Cal said, and I'm tired of spending it alone. Inside the cabin, two small faces pressed against the window watching, hoping. Cal nodded toward them. Besides, I made a promise to your daughters, and the one thing I've got left is my word. Abigail's eyes filled with tears she wouldn't let fall. You don't know what you're agreeing to. Then I guess we'd better figure it out together. The sun was rising now, painting the snow in shades of gold and rose. Somewhere in town, Judge Blackwood was probably already planning his next move. But here at this fence line, two people who'd been running in different directions decided to stand still and fight. It wasn't much of a Christmas miracle, but sometimes the small ones mattered most. The girls burst through the cabin door before Abigail could respond. Rose reached Cal first, throwing her arms around his legs with the complete trust of a child who believed prayers got answered. You're staying. You're really staying. Lily hung back, her expression caught between hope and suspicion. For how long? Long enough, Cal said. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got right now. Abigail touched his arm, her voice low. Mr. Mackenzie, I need you to understand what you've just agreed to. Judge Blackwood doesn't make idle threats. If you stay, you become a target. Then we'd better make sure he regrets that decision. Rose was already pulling him toward the cabin. Come on, we have to make plans. Lily's good at plans. She makes lists and everything. Inside, the warmth hit him like a wall. Lily was already spreading paper on the table, the precious kind that cost money they didn't have. She had a pencil stub and the intense focus of a general planning a campaign. We need to know what you can do, Lily said without preamble. Can you shoot? Lily. Abigail's voice was sharp. It's a fair question, Mama. If the judge sends men, he won't send men. He'll use the law. That's how men like him operate. Cal sat across from Lily. I can shoot. I can track. I can read land surveys and legal documents. I know federal law regarding territorial land claims, and I've dealt with corrupt officials before. Lily wrote everything down in careful letters. That's good. That's all useful. What can't you do? I can't promise this ends cleanly. I can't guarantee nobody gets hurt. And I can't promise I'm the hero you're looking for. We're not looking for a hero, Lily said. We're looking for someone who won't run away when things get bad. Lily, enough. Abigail's tone left no room for argument. Mr. Mackenzie has agreed to help. That's more than we had yesterday. Now both of you get changed into warmer clothes. We have chores that won't wait. After the girls disappeared behind their curtain, Abigail poured more coffee with hands that trembled slightly. I should tell you everything. About Thomas. About what he found, about why Blackwood wants this land so badly. I'm listening. She sat wrapping both hands around her cup like it could keep her anchored. Thomas spent 3 months documenting systematic fraud across 14 homesteads. Everyone had boundary markers moved to steal mineral-rich land. Everyone had their surveys corrected by the Territorial Land Office. And everyone had original claims held by families who suddenly sold cheap or died in convenient accidents. 14 families. That's a pattern even federal authorities couldn't ignore. That's what Thomas thought. He had photographs, measurements, witness statements. He was going to Helena the day after Christmas, 1887. Her voice went flat. He died December 22nd. Crushed in a mine shaft collapse. Alone. In a mine he had no reason to be inside. Cal felt the familiar burn of injustice. The judge cleaned up the scene before any real investigation. He performed the investigation, declared it accidental. Had Thomas buried before I could even demand an autopsy. Her jaw tightened. I tried going to Helena myself. Got as far as the stage station before the judge's men escorted me home. Said traveling alone would raise questions about my mental stability. Said grief was making me irrational. Where's the evidence now? Abigail met his eyes. Hidden where only someone who knew Thomas could find it. The judge suspects it exists, but he can't prove anything without it. That's why he wants this property, why he's been circling for 18 months, tightening the noose slowly. Show me. I don't know if I can trust you yet. The honesty surprised him. Most people would have pretended trust came automatically. That's smart. You shouldn't trust me. Not yet. But Abigail, if that evidence is your only leverage, you need someone who can use it properly. Someone who knows federal law and how to get it into the right hands without getting killed in the process. She studied his face for a long moment. Why did you really agree to stay? Cal thought about lying, about giving her a comfortable answer that would make her feel safer. But these Thornton women valued truth over comfort. Because my wife used to say that running from pain just meant carrying it further. Because I've spent 4 years proving her right. And because those girls asked for someone brave, and I'd like to be that person, even if I don't know how anymore. Abigail's expression softened fractionally. Your wife was wise. She was. I wasn't smart enough to listen while she was alive. The girls emerged layered in clothes that had been patched too many times. Rose headed for the door, but Lily stopped beside Cal. Mr. Cal, if you're going to stay, you should know something. The judge has people watching us. Always. So whatever you do, assume someone's reporting back to him. She was 8 years old and spoke like a resistance fighter. Cal felt something crack further in his chest. Good information to have. Thank you. After the girls left, Abigail stood. Come on. I'll show you what Thomas died protecting. They walked to the barn through snow that sparkled in morning light. Abigail moved with purpose, leading him to the back corner where hay bales were stacked against the wall. She moved 3 bales aside, revealing a loose board. Behind it was a metal box. Thomas hid 3 copies. One here, one buried in a location only I know, one sent to someone he trusted before he died. Who'd he send it to? A federal marshal in Denver. James Caldwell, no relation to the judge. Thomas served with him during the war. She opened the box. Inside were rolled maps, folded papers, and what looked like a surveyor's notebook. Marshal Caldwell wrote back saying he'd received the package and would investigate. That was December 20th, 1887. 2 days before Thomas died. Yes. Cal examined the contents carefully. The maps showed survey boundaries with Thomas's corrections marked in different ink. The notebook contained meticulous entries, dates, measurements, names of witnesses. The papers were official land office documents with discrepancies highlighted. This is solid evidence. Documented, photographed, witnessed. Why hasn't Marshal Caldwell acted on it? Abigail's laugh was bitter. That's the question I've been asking for 18 months. I've written him 6 times. No response. Either Blackwood got to him, or the federal government doesn't care about territorial fraud against homesteaders. Cal felt the familiar rage building. Or the marshal's dead too. The words hung between them like a death sentence. That's what I've been afraid to consider, Abigail whispered. If Thomas sent evidence to the one federal officer who could have helped, and that officer is also dead, then Blackwood's reach is longer than we thought. They stood in the barn, morning light streaming through gaps in the walls, holding evidence that could destroy a corrupt judge if anyone with authority cared enough to use it. What do we do? Abigail asked. We verify. Is there a telegraph office in town? Yes, but the operator is Blackwood's nephew. Of course he was. Cal was beginning to understand the depth of corruption they faced. Blackwood hadn't just bought a few officials. He'd systematically built a network that controlled information flow through the entire territory. Then I'll ride to the next town. Send inquiries from there. You don't have a horse, and buying one means going into town, which means facing Blackwood's people directly. I know. Cal rolled up the maps carefully. But sitting here waiting for the custody hearing isn't a strategy. It's surrender. We need to go on offense. Abigail grabbed his arm. Cal, you don't understand this town. Blackwood's been here 15 years. He owns the bank, the general store, the saloon. He employs half the men and holds mortgages on most of the businesses. If you go in there asking questions, then people will talk, word will spread, and maybe someone with a conscience will decide they're tired of watching a tyrant destroy families. Or you'll end up like Thomas. Cal turned to face her fully. Abigail, I've been dying slowly for 4 years. If I'm going to die, I'd rather it be for something that matters than from loneliness in some nameless town. She stepped back, her expression shifting through emotions too fast to track. You can't come here and say things like that. You can't make me... She stopped, flushing. Make you what? Hope. I can't afford hope. Hope is dangerous when you're barely surviving. Cal understood exactly what she meant. Hope was the most dangerous thing in the world, because it made you vulnerable to disappointment that could break you. Then don't hope. Just let me do what needs doing. Rose's voice called from outside. Mama Lily found tracks in the snow. Someone's been watching the cabin. They ran. Lily was crouched by the fence line examining boot prints that led from the tree line to a spot directly facing the cabin. The snow was disturbed where someone had stood for an extended period. These are fresh, Lily said. Made after the judge left this morning. Someone stayed behind to watch. Cal knelt beside her, studying the tracks. Good eyes. Can you tell anything else? Lily pointed. Big boots. Heavy person. Stood in one spot for maybe 20 minutes, shifting weight back and forth. Then walked back toward town, not trying to hide the tracks. Why wouldn't they hide the tracks? Rose asked. Because they wanted us to know we're being watched, Abigail said quietly. That's the point. Keep us afraid. Cal stood following the tracks with his eyes. Or they're not as smart as they think they are. These tracks tell us exactly which direction they went, how fast they were moving, probably how tall they are. If Blackwood's hiring stupid help, that's useful information. Lily's face lit up. Can you track them? Can you find out who it was? I can, but first I need to go into town. Buy a horse, gather information, and let people see that your mother has someone standing with her now. I'll come with you, Abigail said immediately. No, you need to stay with the girls. If this is a diversion to get you out of the cabin, then you need someone watching your back. Cal, you don't know this town. You don't know which men are Blackwoods, which are just scared, and which might actually help if pushed. She was right, but Cal didn't like it. Splitting up meant leaving the girls vulnerable. I'll stay with them. The voice came from the road. They all turned. A woman on horseback approached, older, maybe 60, with iron gray hair and the kind of weathered face that spoke of decades on the frontier. She sat her horse like she'd been born in the saddle. Doc Finch, Abigail said, surprise evident in her voice. What are you doing here? Heard through the grapevine that you had a visitor. Thought I'd come check on things. Doc Finch's eyes swept over Cal with professional assessment. You the one who nearly froze to death yesterday? Yes, ma'am. Foolish time to be traveling. Good thing these girls found you. She dismounted with easy grace. I'm Eleanor Finch, closest thing to a doctor this territory has. And before you ask, yes, I examined Thomas Thornton's body after the accident. And no, his injuries weren't consistent with falling rocks. He was beaten to death, then placed in that mine shaft. The blunt statement hit like a physical blow. Abigail swayed, and Cal caught her elbow. You never told me, Abigail whispered. Couldn't. Blackwood was standing right there during the examination. But I wrote everything down. Every inconsistency, every injury that didn't match his story. Doc Finch pulled a small notebook from her coat. Been carrying this for 18 months, waiting for someone who could use it properly. Cal took the notebook, flipping through pages filled with medical observations written in precise handwriting. Skull fractures inconsistent with fallen debris. Defensive wounds on hands and forearms. Broken ribs suggesting sustained beating. Conclusion: homicide staged as accident. Why now? Cal asked. Why give this to us now? Doc Finch's face was grim. Because I'm 73 years old and tired of watching that bastard destroy this town. Because I took an oath to do no harm, and my silence has been harming people for too long. And because I examined 2 other accidental death victims with the same injury patterns. Thomas Thornton wasn't Blackwood's first murder. He's just the first one where someone might actually be able to prove it. Rose tugged at Doc Finch's coat. Are you going to help us? I am, child. Starting by staying here with you and your sister while your mama and Mr. Mackenzie go into town. She fixed Cal with a steady gaze. I was an army nurse during the war. I can shoot suture and keep 2 little girls safe for a few hours. You worry about staying alive long enough to use that evidence. Cal looked at Abigail. Your call. Doc Finch stays with the girls we go to town together, or I go alone and you stay here. Abigail's jaw set with determination. We go together. The girls will be safe with Doc Finch, and you'll need me to identify Blackwood's people. Inside the cabin, Doc Finch settled in like she'd done this before. She loaded a rifle with practiced efficiency and set it within easy reach. She checked the cabin's sight lines and made Rose promise to stay away from windows. Lily, Doc Finch said, you're in charge of keeping your sister calm and quiet. Think you can handle that? Lily nodded solemnly. Yes, ma'am. Good girl. Doc Finch turned to Cal and Abigail. You've got 3 hours before I start worrying. After that, I come looking. Understood? They understood. The walk into town took 30 minutes through snow that was already melting under strong sun. Cal used the time to memorize landmarks, assess defensive positions, and plan escape routes. Old habits from his scouting days that he'd never quite lost. Abigail walked beside him with her spine straight and her head high. She'd changed into her better dress, still patched, still worn, but clean and pressed. Her message was clear. She wouldn't be ashamed of her poverty or cowed by her circumstances. Tell me about the town, Cal said. Who owns what? Who owes who? Who's got leverage? Blackwood owns the bank, which means he controls most of the mortgages. His brother-in-law runs the general store. His nephew operates the telegraph. The saloon owner, Jack Brennan, is neutral, runs a clean establishment and doesn't take sides. Reverend Hayes is honest but scared. Sheriff Reed is complicated. Complicated how? He and Blackwood served together during the war. Reed saved Blackwood's life at Shiloh. He's been paying that debt for 15 years. Cal understood that kind of obligation. War bonds ran deep, sometimes deeper than morality. What about people who might help anyone in this town have the spine to stand up? Abigail was quiet for a moment. Maybe. Samuel and Rachel Cooper are Quakers. They don't believe in violence, but they believe in justice. They've helped me with harvests, watched the girls when I needed to go to town. They're good people, but they're also practical. Standing against Blackwood could cost them everything. Sometimes practical people need someone else to be impractical first, to show it's possible. They crested the rise and the town spread before them. Bozeman was larger than Cal expected, maybe 300 residents with buildings that spoke of prosperity built on mining money. The main street was wide and well-maintained. Storefronts had fresh paint. This was a town that was growing, thriving. And at its heart was a courthouse that dominated the square territorial justice rendered in stone and timber. That's where the custody hearing will be, Abigail said quietly. In that building, in front of that man, I'm supposed to defend my right to raise my own daughters. Cal heard the despair beneath her controlled tone. You won't be defending alone. Not anymore. They entered town from the east, and Cal felt eyes tracking them immediately. People on the street noticed, whispered, adjusted their paths to get a better look. Word of a stranger staying at the Thornton homestead had clearly spread fast. The general store was their first stop. Cal needed supplies, and they needed to make their presence known. The store was well stocked and organized, the kind of establishment that served a prosperous community. Behind the counter stood a man in his 40s, with shrewd eyes and a smile that didn't quite reach them. Mrs. Thornton, he said, haven't seen you in town for a while. Hope you're well. As well as can be expected, Mr. Brennan. I need flour, coffee, and salt. and Mr. Mackenzie needs to arrange for a horse." Brennan's attention swiveled to Cal. "You the fellow who collapsed at the Thornton place?" "I'm the fellow who's staying at the Thornton place. Cal Mackenzie." He didn't offer to shake hands. The calculation in Brennan's eyes was obvious, weighing profit against potential trouble with the judge. "A horse won't come cheap this time of year." "I didn't expect it would. What's fair price?" "Depends on the horse. I've got 3 available. $60 for the bay gelding, $40 for the mare with the white blaze, $30 for the spotted pony." All prices were inflated by at least $20. Cal had been buying horses long enough to know gouging when he heard it. "I'll give you 30 for the bay, and you'll throw in a saddle that actually fits him." Brennan's eyebrows rose. "That's not how negotiation works." "It is when you're trying to rob a man because your brother-in-law told you to make his life difficult." Cal's voice stayed even. "We both know that bay's worth 40 on a good day. I'm offering 30 because you're going to feel guilty about overcharging a man who's trying to help a widow and 2 little girls. And because if you don't, everyone in this store is going to know you put profit over decency." The 3 other customers in the store suddenly became very interested in their purchases. Brennan's face flushed. "Mister, I don't know who you think you are. I'm someone who knows what horses cost, and I'm someone who's willing to pay fair price for fair dealing. $30 the bay and a saddle. Or I walk out and tell everyone who asks that Jack Brennan tried to rob me because he's too afraid of Judge Blackwood to be his own man." The silence in the store was complete. This was the moment Brennan could side with profit and fear, or he could choose dignity. Brennan's jaw worked. Then he nodded once sharp and angry. $30. Saddle included. But don't expect any favors from me in the future." "Don't expect to be asked for any?" Cal counted out the money, half his remaining cash. Abigail had been gathering her supplies, and when she brought them to the counter, Brennan tallied them with quick efficiency. "That'll be $6. Abigail counted out coins carefully, each one probably representing hours of work. When she finished, she had 30 cents remaining. They walked out carrying supplies and leading a solid bay gelding that was actually worth the $30 Cal had paid. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. "That was dangerous," Abigail said quietly. "Challenging Brennan like that. Someone needs to show this town that Blackwood doesn't control everything. Might as well start with overpriced horses." They were halfway down the street when a voice called out, "Mrs. Thornton, a word please." Sheriff Clayton Reed approached with the careful gait of a man trying to appear non-threatening. He was tall, probably 50, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too much. "Sheriff," Abigail said neutrally. "Ma'am, just wanted to welcome your guest to town." Reed's attention shifted to Cal. "Clayton Reed, Sheriff of Bozeman and surrounding territory. Cal Mackenzie." Reed studied him with professional thoroughness. "You planning to stay in our town long, Mr. Mackenzie?" "As long as Mrs. Thornton needs help with her property." "I see." Reed's expression gave nothing away. "You should know that the judge has expressed concerns about strangers involving themselves in local matters, especially strangers with no clear business here." "My business is helping a neighbor. That's clear enough." "Neighbor implies you have property nearby. Do you?" Cal smiled without humor. "I'm clarifying my language, Sheriff. I'm helping a woman who's being harassed by a corrupt official who's using his position to steal land and terrorize families. Is that clear enough?" Reed's face went still. "That's a serious accusation. It's a factual statement, and unless you're completely in his pocket, you already know it's true." For a moment, something flickered in Reed's eyes, guilt maybe, or anger at his own complicity, but it vanished quickly. "Mr. Mackenzie, I'd advise you to be very careful about making accusations you can't prove. Slander is a serious offense in territorial court. So is murder. So is land fraud. So is conspiracy to violate federal homestead law." Cal kept his voice conversational. "But I notice you haven't arrested anyone for those crimes. Why is that, Sheriff?" Reed's hand didn't drift toward his gun, but the possibility hung between them. Around them, townspeople had stopped to watch. This confrontation was becoming public. "I enforce the law as written, Mr. Mackenzie. not as self-righteous strangers think it should be enforced. Thomas Thornton was beaten to death and staged to look like a mining accident. You investigated that death. What did your report say? The question landed like a bomb. Reed's face flushed, and his hand finally did move toward his gun. Abigail grabbed Cal's arm. Cal, don't. Your wife deserves to know, Cal said to Reed, never breaking eye contact. Did you file a truthful report about her husband's death, or did you falsify evidence to protect your war buddy? Reed's hand closed on his gun grip. You're coming with me, right now. Disturbing the peace, making unfounded accusations. Sheriff Reed. A new voice cut through the tension. What seems to be the problem? Reverend Marcus Hayes strode down the street with the kind of purposeful authority that commanded attention despite his plain black coat and lack of physical intimidation. He was younger than Cal expected, early 40s, with intelligent eyes and the calm presence of someone who'd faced down plenty of conflict in his time. Reverend, this doesn't concern you, Reed said. A public confrontation involving one of my parishioners absolutely concerns me. Hayes positioned himself between Cal and the sheriff with deliberate precision. Mrs. Thornton, are you and Mr. Mackenzie in any danger? We're fine, Reverend. The sheriff was just expressing his concerns about my house guest. Hayes smiled, but it carried steel underneath. I see. Sheriff, I'm sure you were just welcoming Mr. Mackenzie to our community and offering assistance if needed. Isn't that right? Reed's jaw clenched. But with a reverend standing between them and half the town watching, he couldn't very well arrest Cal without looking like the tyrant he was. Of course, Reed said tightly. Mr. Mackenzie, welcome to Bozeman. I trust you'll be a respectful guest. As respectful as I'm treated, Sheriff. Reed stalked away, his hand still on his gun. The watching crowd slowly dispersed, though Cal could feel their attention like physical weight. Hayes turned to them with a gentler expression. That was remarkably foolish, Mr. Mackenzie. Clayton Reed may be complicit, but he's also dangerous when cornered. Reverend, thank you for intervening, Abigail said. Mrs. Thornton, you and I both know this town has been poisoned by corruption for too long. If Mr. Mackenzie is willing to speak truth, the least I can do is make sure he survives long enough to do it properly. Hayes paused, though perhaps with slightly more discretion next time. Cal nodded. Point taken. Good. Now come with me, both of you. There are people you should meet. Hayes led them to a modest house on the edge of town. Samuel and Rachel Cooper sat on their porch, despite the cold quilting together, in companionable silence. Samuel stood as they approached a man in his 60s, with gentle eyes and the kind of calm that spoke of deep conviction. Rachel remained seated, her hands steady on her needlework. Reverend, Samuel said, this is unexpected. Samuel, Rachel, this is Caleb Mackenzie. He's helping Mrs. Thornton with some difficulties regarding her homestead. Rachel set down her quilting. We heard, the whole town's heard. Judge Blackwood is not pleased. The judge's pleasure isn't my concern, Cal said. Samuel smiled. A man of principle. Those are rare in these parts. Come sit. Tell us how we can help. Over the next hour, sitting on that porch in the cold, Cal laid out everything. Thomas Thornton's evidence, Doc Finch's medical documentation, the pattern of deaths and stolen land, the custody threat hanging over Abigail's daughters. The Coopers listened without interruption. When Cal finished, Samuel and Rachel exchanged a long look, the kind of communication that came from decades of marriage. We cannot participate in violence, Samuel said carefully. Our faith forbids it. I understand. But we can bear witness. We can testify. We can offer sanctuary if needed. And we can encourage others to find their courage. Rachel's voice was soft but firm. Judge Blackwood has terrorized this community for too long. If you're truly going to stand against him, you won't stand alone. It wasn't everything, but it was something. They returned to the homestead as afternoon sun painted the snow gold. Doc Finch met them at the door with relief evident on her weathered face. Girls are fine. Nobody came by. But you need to hear what Lily found. Inside, Lily was waiting at the table with papers spread before her. She looked up at Cal with an expression far too serious for an 8-year-old. Mr. Cal, I went through Papa's notebook again. There's something Mama didn't see. Something important. She pointed to a page filled with Thomas's handwriting. At the bottom, written in tiny letters, was a name and date. Marshal James Caldwell, arrived December 21st, 1887. Meeting confirmed. Cal felt ice form in his stomach. Thomas met with the marshal in person, the day before he died. Lily nodded. And there's more. Papa wrote another note on the back of his survey map. She flipped the map over. On the blank back in Thomas's careful hand. If anything happens to me, evidence copy with Marshal Caldwell. Second copy buried at Old Homestead Ruins, North 40 acres. Third copy with J.B. Trust him. Abigail grabbed the map. J.B. Who's J.B.? Thomas didn't know anyone with those initials. Jack Brennan, Cal said quietly. They all stared at him. The man at the general store. Thomas gave him evidence for safekeeping. Cal met Abigail's eyes. And Brennan's been sitting on it for 18 months while you struggled alone. The betrayal hit Abigail like a physical blow. She swayed and Cal caught her. Why? She whispered. Why would Jack keep quiet? Fear, Doc Finch said grimly. Or greed. Probably both. Rose's small voice broke the silence. Does this mean we can prove the judge is bad? Does this mean Lily and me don't have to leave Mama? Cal knelt so he could look both girls in the eyes. It means we have a chance. But we have to be smart about how we use it. How? Lily asked. By making Brennan more afraid of being caught helping Blackwood than he is of Blackwood himself. Abigail's expression shifted from despair to something harder. What do you have in mind? Cal stood his mind already working through possibilities. Tomorrow we go back to town. We tell Brennan we know about the evidence Thomas gave him. We give him a choice: hand it over and testify, or we expose his complicity to federal authorities. He'll run straight to Blackwood, Doc Finch said. Good. Let Blackwood know we're coming for him. Let him know his control is slipping. Desperate men make mistakes. Desperate men also get violent, Abigail said quietly. Yes, they do. Which is why Doc Finch and the Coopers are going to keep the girls safe while we handle this. Lily stood up, her small face fierce. I want to help. You are helping. By staying alive. By staying safe. By giving your mother one less thing to worry about. Cal touched her shoulder gently. That's the hardest job of all, Lily. Trust me to do mine. After a moment, she nodded. That night, Cal took first watch. He sat by the cabin window, rifle across his lap, watching shadows move across moonlit snow. Inside, Abigail and the girls slept. Outside, the Montana night was cold and clear, and full of potential violence. Around midnight, Abigail emerged from behind the curtain. She'd changed into a simple nightgown with a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. Her hair was down, and in the firelight she looked younger, less burdened. Can't sleep, she said quietly, sitting beside him. Keep thinking about Thomas trusting Jack Brennan. About 18 months of silence while that coward sat on evidence that could have saved us. People are complicated. Maybe Brennan wanted to help, but couldn't figure out how without destroying himself. That's generous. It's realistic. Fear makes people do things they hate themselves for later. They sat in silence for a while, watching the night together. Cal, Abigail said eventually, what you said to the sheriff today about Thomas being murdered. Thank you for saying it out loud, for making someone acknowledge what happened. You deserve to hear it. The girls deserve to hear it. This town needed to hear it. It's going to make everything harder. Everything's already hard. Might as well be hard while telling the truth. Abigail laughed softly. It was the first time he'd heard genuine amusement from her, and the sound did something to the frozen places inside his chest. Your wife must have loved your stubborn streak. She did, right up until it got me sent away on the wrong patrol at the wrong time. Cal's voice roughened. If I'd been home, maybe Sarah and Ethan would still be alive. Maybe I could have... You can't think like that. You'll drive yourself mad with the maybes. You don't do the same thing. Wonder if you'd fought harder, spoken louder, gone to Helena despite the threats. Abigail was quiet. Then, every day, every single day, I wonder if I failed Thomas, if I'm failing the girls, if I'm not strong enough or smart enough or brave enough to protect what's left of our family. Cal turned to face her. You're the strongest person I've met. You've held off a corrupt judge for 18 months while raising 2 daughters and running a homestead alone. That's not failure. That's extraordinary. In the firelight, tears glittered in Abigail's eyes. Then why doesn't it feel extraordinary? Why does it feel like I'm barely surviving? Because you're doing it alone. And humans weren't meant to carry everything alone. She wiped her eyes quickly, as if angry at herself for showing weakness. But Cal understood. He'd done the same thing for 4 years, crying only in private, keeping the grief locked away where it couldn't make him vulnerable. Cal, I need you to promise me something. What? If this goes wrong, if Blackwood wins the custody hearing, if he takes my girls, promise me you'll get them back, however you have to, whatever it costs. Promise me. The request was impossible. Promising to steal children from territorial custody to go against the law itself. But looking at Abigail's face, seeing the desperate love of a mother who'd already lost too much, Cal couldn't refuse. I promise. She took his hand. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was strong. Thank you. They sat like that for a while, hands linked, watching the fire burn lower. And for the first time in 4 years, Cal didn't feel entirely alone. The next morning brought unwelcome visitors. 3 men on horseback rode up to the fence line just after dawn. Not the judge. This time these were hired muscle, the kind of men who did violence for wages and slept fine afterward. Cal was outside already checking the fence. He recognized the approach for what it was. Intimidation pure and simple. The lead rider was massive 6'5", probably 240, with a face that had been hit too many times. His companions were smaller but no less dangerous. You Mackenzie? I am. Name's Dutch. Judge Blackwood sent us with a message. I'm listening. Dutch leaned forward in his saddle. The judge appreciates that you helped Mrs. Thornton during the storm. Acts of Christian charity reflect well on our community. But your continued presence is causing concern. The judge suggests you move along before things get complicated. Tell the judge I appreciate his concern, but I'm staying. That would be a mistake. Cal smiled without humor. Wouldn't be my first one. Dutch's expression hardened. You don't understand what you're dealing with. The judge has friends, he has resources, he has patience, and he always gets what he wants. Then this will be a new experience for him. The other 2 riders moved their horses forward, flanking Dutch. The threat was obvious. Behind Cal, the cabin door opened. Abigail stepped out, rifle in hand. Not pointing it at anyone yet, but the message was clear. Dutch's eyes flicked to her, then back to Cal. Mrs. Thornton, you're making poor choices. Associating with drifters, refusing reasonable offers, teaching your daughters to disrespect authority. The judge worries about their welfare in such an environment. The judge can worry about his own soul, Abigail said coldly. Mine and my daughters are none of his concern. Actually, ma'am, they're very much his concern. As a territorial judge, he has authority over custody matters. And when a mother demonstrates poor judgment, get off my property. Dutch smiled. We're on the other side of your fence line. Public road. We can stand here all day if we want. Then stand there until you freeze. But if you cross that fence, I'll shoot you for trespassing. The standoff held for a long moment. Then Dutch shrugged. Judge said you'd be difficult. He's prepared to be patient, but Mrs. Thornton's patience has limits, and when those limits are reached, he let the threat hang unfinished. They rode away slowly, making it clear they weren't running, making it clear they'd be back. Abigail lowered her rifle with shaking hands. That was a warning. That was a test. They wanted to see if we'd fold under pressure. And we didn't. So next time they'll escalate. From inside the cabin, Rose's voice called out, "Mama, are the bad men gone?" Abigail's face crumpled for just a moment before she caught herself. "Yes, baby, they're gone." But they both knew that was temporary. The bad men would be back. And next time, they might not be content with just words. Cal checked his rifle, counted his ammunition, and wondered if he'd promised more than he could deliver. But Lily was watching from the window with those two old eyes, and Rose was pressed against her sister with fear written across her small face, and Abigail was standing straight despite the terror he could see beneath her courage. Backing down wasn't an option anymore. "Get the girls ready," Cal said. "We're going to town. Today. Right now." Cal, especially after that threat, "We're going to Jack Brennan's store and we're going to get that evidence, because sitting here waiting for Blackwood's next move means we've already lost." Abigail met his eyes. After a moment, she nodded. "Then let's finish this." They left the girls with Doc Finch again, but this time Cal made sure everyone was armed. Doc Finch had her rifle. The Coopers had agreed to check in every hour, and Lily had been given clear instructions to run to the root cellar if anyone crossed the fence line. The ride into town felt different this time. Abigail sat straight in the saddle of the spotted pony Cal had borrowed from the Coopers, but her knuckles were white on the reins. She knew what they were about to do: confront a man who'd been complicit in her husband's murder through 18 months of cowardly silence. "When we get there," Cal said quietly, "let me do the talking first. If Brennan feels cornered too fast, he'll shut down completely. And if he refuses, then you tell him exactly what you think of a man who let a widow and her children suffer while he sat on evidence that could have saved them." Abigail's smile was sharp. "I can do that." The general store was busy when they arrived: mid-morning trade farmers buying supplies, women examining fabric. Jack Brennan stood behind his counter measuring out flour for an elderly woman. He looked up when they entered, and Cal saw the exact moment recognition hit. Brennan's face went pale. "Mrs. Thornton," he said carefully. "Mr. Mackenzie, what can I do for you folks today?" "We need to speak privately," Cal said. "Now." "I'm with customers." "They can wait. This can't." The other customers had gone quiet, sensing drama. Brennan's eyes darted around like a trapped animal looking for escape routes. "Jack." Abigail's voice cut through the tension. "My husband trusted you. Whatever he gave you, we need it. Today." Brennan's face crumpled. For a moment, Cal thought he might actually cooperate. Then Sheriff Reed walked through the door. "Morning, folks. Jack, I need to borrow your storage room for official business." Reed's hand rested on his gun. "Mr. Mackenzie, Mrs. Thornton, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "We're conducting business with Mr. Brennan," Cal said. "Your business can wait." "Actually, Sheriff, it can't. We're here to collect property that belongs to Mrs. Thornton. Property her late husband left in Mr. Brennan's care." Reed's expression hardened. "That's a serious claim. You got proof?" Abigail pulled out Thomas's notebook, opening it to the page Lily had found. She held it up so everyone in the store could see. "Third copy with JB, trust him. My husband's handwriting. His final instructions before he was murdered." Her voice rang clear and strong. "Jack Brennan has been holding evidence of territorial land fraud for 18 months. Evidence that could have stopped Judge Blackwood from threatening to take my daughters." The store erupted. Customers gasped, whispered, pushed closer to see. Brennan looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him. "That's enough." Reed's hand moved to his gun. "Everyone out, now. This is official business." "Sheriff, you can't just—" the elderly woman started. "Out, or I'll arrest everyone for interfering with law enforcement." The customers filed out reluctantly, but Cal could see them gathering outside the windows. This confrontation had just become very public. Reed turned to Brennan. "Jack, do you have property belonging to Thomas Thornton?" Brennan's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. "Answer the sheriff, Jack," Cal said. "Do you have evidence that Thomas Thornton gave you before he died? Yes or no?" I can't." Brennan looked desperately at Reed. "Clayton, you know I can't answer that." "Why not?" Abigail's voice shook with fury. "Why can't you admit that my husband trusted you, that you've been hiding evidence while the judge systematically destroyed my life?" "Because Blackwood will kill him," Reed said quietly. "Just like he killed Thomas. Just like he'll kill anyone who testifies against him." The admission hung in the air like gun smoke. Reed's face showed shock at his own words, as if he hadn't meant to say them out loud. Cal moved fast, blocking the door. "Say that again, Sheriff. Say it so everyone outside can hear." "Get out of my way." "You just admitted Judge Blackwood murdered Thomas Thornton. That's not something you walk back from." Reed's hand closed on his gun grip. "I admitted nothing. You're twisting my words." "Then clarify them. Tell us exactly what you meant." Outside the store, faces pressed against the windows. Reverend Hayes had joined the crowd. So had Samuel Cooper. Word was spreading fast. The sheriff had just said something he shouldn't have. Brennan suddenly broke. "It's in the back room. Top shelf behind the seed bags. A metal box wrapped in oilcloth." "Jack, shut up," Reed started. "No, I'm done shutting up. I've been living with this for 18 months, Clayton. 18 months of looking at those little girls and knowing I could help them but being too scared to do it." Tears streamed down Brennan's face. "Thomas died because I was too much of a coward to stand with him. I won't let his daughter suffer because I'm still a coward." He walked to the back room. Reed drew his gun. "Nobody move." Cal raised his hands slowly. "Sheriff, you really want to shoot unarmed people in front of half the town? That's going to be hard to explain." "I'm preventing theft of evidence in a territorial matter." "Evidence of what? You haven't specified any crime, unless you're admitting there's something worth protecting in that box." Reed's gun hand trembled. He was caught in the trap of his own making. Acknowledging the evidence meant admitting it existed, but denying it meant letting them walk out with proof of Blackwood's crimes. Brennan returned carrying a metal box. His hands shook, but his face showed relief. "Thomas gave this to me, December 20th, 1887. Said if anything happened to him, I should take it to the federal marshal in Helena. I was supposed to leave the next day, but Blackwood found out," Abigail whispered. "He knew Thomas had evidence. He knew he'd shared it. That's why Thomas died." "I'm sorry," Brennan said, tears choking his voice. "God forgive me, Abigail, I'm so sorry. I was supposed to go to Helena, but when Thomas died, I got scared. I convinced myself it was too dangerous. That protecting myself and my family was more important than—" He couldn't finish. He set the box on the counter between them like an offering at an altar. Reed lowered his gun slowly. "Jack, you just signed your death warrant." "Maybe, but I can finally look at myself in the mirror again." Cal took the box. It was heavier than expected. Inside would be copies of surveys, photographs, witness statements, everything Thomas Thornton had died protecting. "Sheriff," Cal said carefully, "you have a choice to make. You can arrest us for taking property that legally belongs to Mrs. Thornton. Or you can let us walk out of here and pretend you didn't see anything. And then what Blackwood will know, Jack talked. He'll know I didn't stop you. This is over for both of us. Or," Abigail said, her voice strengthening, "you could do the job you swore an oath to do. You could protect us, instead of the man who's been poisoning this town for 15 years. Reed holstered his gun. His face showed the exhaustion of a man who'd been carrying guilt for too long. "I saved Cyrus Blackwood's life at Shiloh. I've been paying for that decision ever since. Every time he threatened someone, every time he stole land, every time he killed to cover his crimes, I told myself I owed him, that the war debt mattered more than what came after. But it doesn't, Cal said. No, it doesn't. Reed met Abigail's eyes. Your husband was a good man, Mrs. Thornton. He came to me before he went to Blackwood, showed me everything he'd found, asked me to help him take it to Helena. Abigail's breath caught. What did you tell him? I told him to be careful, that Blackwood was dangerous, that he should consider his family's safety before making accusations he couldn't take back. Reed's voice broke. 3 days later, Thomas was dead. And I knew Cyrus had killed him, but I couldn't prove it, and I didn't have the courage to try. You have it now, Cal said. Right now, in this moment, you can choose differently. Reed looked at the crowd outside the windows, at Reverend Hayes and Samuel Cooper, and the 24 townspeople who'd heard everything through the thin walls. At Jack Brennan, who'd finally found his spine. At Abigail Thornton, who'd survived 18 months of hell with her dignity intact. All right, Reed said quietly. I'll testify. I'll tell a federal court everything I know about Cyrus Blackwood's criminal enterprise. But Mrs. Thornton, Mr. Mackenzie, once I do this, there's no going back. Blackwood will come for all of us. Then we'd better make sure he fails, Cal said. They walked out of the store carrying the metal box. The crowd parted silently. Some faces showed support. Others showed fear. A few showed the calculation of people deciding which side would win. Reverend Hayes stepped forward. Mrs. Thornton, I think it's time the church took an official position on certain matters. I'll be delivering a sermon this Sunday about the moral obligation to stand against tyranny. I expect full attendance. Thank you, Reverend. Samuel Cooper nodded to Cal. Rachel and I will spread word. By tonight, everyone in this territory will know what happened here today. They rode hard for the homestead. The box was heavy across Cal's saddle, filled with the truth that had cost Thomas Thornton his life. Behind them, Bozeman was probably erupting into chaos as word spread of Reed's confession and Brennan's betrayal. Blackwood knows by now, Abigail said as they rode. He'll be planning his response. Let him plan. We've got evidence, we've got witnesses, and we've got... Cal stopped. Ahead, black smoke rose from the direction of the homestead. They spurred their horses into a gallop. Cal's chest felt like it was being crushed. Not the girls. Please God, not the girls. They crested the rise and saw the barn engulfed in flames. Doc Finch stood in the yard with her rifle, the twins huddled behind her. 3 riders circled at a distance, Dutch and his men watching their handiwork. Cal was off his horse before it fully stopped running toward the girls. They were crying, but unhurt. Doc Finch's face was set in grim lines. They rode up 10 minutes ago, threw torches into the barn before I could get a shot off. Said it was a message from the judge. This is what happens to people who forget their place. The barn collapsed inward with a roar of flame and smoke. Everything inside tools feed Cal's saddle gone in minutes. The horses had been in the corral, thank God. But the loss was still devastating. Rose clung to Abigail, sobbing. Mama, they burned Papa's workbench, all his tools, everything he made. Lily stood rigid, her small face twisted with fury. I saw them. I saw their faces. I can identify every single one. Dutch called out from his hoarse voice carrying across the yard. That's for Jack Brennan's big mouth. Judge says next time it won't be the barn. Cal raised his rifle, but they were already riding away laughing. We can't stay here, Doc Finch said urgently. If they burned the barn today, they'll come for the cabin tonight. Where do we go? Abigail's voice shook. This is our home. Thomas built this place, and he'd want his daughters alive more than he'd want his house standing, Cal said. Doc Finch is right. We need to move the girls somewhere safe while we deal with this. The Coopers, Abigail said. Rachel offered sanctuary. Then that's where the girls go. Tonight. Now. They packed quickly clothed Thomas's wooden horses, the metal box of evidence. Rose cried as they left, looking back at the burning barn like she was watching her childhood die. Lily's face stayed hard as stone. The ride to the Cooper homestead took an hour. Rachel met them at the door, took one look at the girls, and gathered them close. "You'll be safe here, little ones. I promise." "Can you keep that promise?" Lily asked, her voice sharp. "Can you promise the judge won't burn your house too?" Rachel knelt so she was eye level with both girls. "I cannot promise fire won't come, but I can promise we'll face it together. And sometimes, child, that's all any of us can offer." Samuel stood behind his wife, his gentle face serious. "Lily Rose, your father was a friend to us. He helped us survey our land. Refused payment, said neighbors didn't charge neighbors for kindness. We owe him a debt. Let us repay it by keeping you safe." After the girls were settled inside, still frightened, but warming to Rachel's gentle care, Cal and Abigail stood in the Cooper's yard, trying to process the day's events. "My barn," Abigail said quietly. 18 years Thomas spent building it right. Gone in 10 minutes. Buildings can be rebuilt. "Not without money, not without—" She stopped, shoulders shaking. Cal pulled her close. She resisted for a moment, then collapsed against his chest, finally allowing herself to break. He held her while she cried, feeling each sob like a physical blow. "I'm so tired," she whispered against his coat. "Tired of fighting, tired of being scared, tired of watching everything Thomas built get destroyed piece by piece." "I know. Do you really know what it's like to watch your whole life burn?" Cal's jaw tightened. "I burned my house in Texas. Stood in the yard and watched everything I owned go up in flames because I couldn't stand being reminded of what I'd lost. So yes, Abigail, I know exactly what it's like." She pulled back, staring at him. "You burned your own house. After Sarah and Ethan died, I couldn't bear being inside those walls. Every room held memories that were killing me, so I set it on fire and rode away." He met her eyes. "I thought destroying the physical things would destroy the pain. Doesn't work that way." "What does work?" "I don't know yet, but I'm starting to think it has something to do with building new things instead of just running from old ones." Abigail touched his face gently. "Cal Mackenzie, you are a surprisingly wise man for someone who claims to be just a drifter. Wisdom comes from making every possible mistake first." She almost smiled. Then her expression shifted to something more vulnerable. "If Blackwood wins the custody hearing, he won't. But if he does, then I keep my promise. I get your daughters back, whatever it takes. Even if it means becoming an outlaw, going against territorial law." Cal thought about that. About the line between justice and law, about when a man had the right to ignore corrupt authority in favor of what was actually right. Even then, Abigail kissed him. It was quick, desperate, more about seeking comfort than romance. But it hit Cal like lightning. When she pulled back, her eyes were wet. "I can't afford to care about you. Can't afford to hope you'll stay after this is over. Can't afford—" "Then don't afford it. Just take it anyway." This time he kissed her. Longer, deeper, with the kind of intensity that came from two people who'd been alone too long and hurt too much. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "This is a terrible idea," Abigail said. "Probably. We're in the middle of a crisis. We should be focused on—" "Abigail, shut up." He kissed her again. And for a moment, just a moment, the fear and anger and exhaustion faded, replaced by something that felt dangerously like hope. Samuel's voice came from the porch, carefully neutral. "Not to interrupt, but Reverend Hayes just rode up. Says there's been a development in town." They broke apart like guilty teenagers. Hayes dismounted, his face grim. "Judge Blackwood has moved the custody hearing up. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. He's claiming that today's events, the confrontation at the store, the barn burning, demonstrate an unsafe environment for the children." "That's insane," Abigail said. He burned our barn. He'll claim it was arson committed by unknown parties. That the incident proves your homestead is unsafe, that you're attracting violence through your association with Mr. Mackenzie. Hayes paused. I'm sorry, but you need to understand what you're facing. Blackwood controls the court. He'll stack testimony against you. And unless you have irrefutable evidence and multiple credible witnesses, he'll rule in his own favor. We have evidence, Cal said. Thomas's documentation, witness statements, survey photographs. From a dead man. Blackwood will argue it's unreliable, possibly forged. You need living witnesses willing to testify under oath. Hayes looked at them both. You need Sheriff Reed and Jack Brennan to stand up in court tomorrow and tell the truth. And you need them to survive long enough to do it. Where are they now? Reed's holed up at the sheriff's office. Brennan's at the church I gave him sanctuary. But Cal, these are men who've just declared war on a territorial judge. Blackwood won't let them live to testify. Cal felt the pieces clicking into place. He'll send men tonight. Kill them both, make it look like what murder-suicide robbery gone wrong. Whatever story keeps him clean. And without living witnesses, your evidence becomes speculation. Your testimony becomes the word of a widow with a grudge and a drifter with no standing. Abigail grabbed Cal's arm. We have to protect them. Reed and Brennan are dead men if we don't. I know. Cal turned to Samuel. How many men in this town would stand with us, fight if necessary? Samuel considered carefully. Fighting goes against our principles. But bearing witness, standing between violence and innocent people, that we can do. Perhaps 10-15 men, maybe more if Reverend Hayes asks. I'll ask, Hayes said immediately. Tonight, we'll gather every man with a conscience and surround the church and the sheriff's office. Make it clear that anyone who wants Reed or Brennan has to go through us first. Blackwood won't care. He'll send Dutch and enough men to go through anyone standing in the way. Then we'd better make sure there are enough of us that going through us costs more than Blackwood's willing to pay, Hayes said grimly. They spent the next 4 hours organizing. Hayes and Samuel rode through the territory, stopping at every homestead, knocking on every door. The message was simple. Stand with us tonight, or explain to your children tomorrow why you let good men die. By sunset 23, men had gathered at the church. Some were farmers who'd benefited from Thomas Thornton's free surveying work. Some were business owners, tired of Blackwood's extortion. Some were just decent people who'd watched corruption go unchallenged for too long. They weren't soldiers. Most had never fired a weapon in anger. But they stood in that churchyard with rifles and resolve, and Cal felt something he hadn't felt in years, hope that ordinary people could still stand against tyranny. Sheriff Reed stood among them, his face showing shame and determination in equal measure. Jack Brennan sat inside the church, still shaking but alive. They'll come around midnight, Reed said. Dutch and probably 6 or 8 men. They'll try to make it quick break and shoot us, burn the evidence. Then we make sure they can't get close, Cal said. Ring of armed men around the church. Anyone approaches, we challenge them. They don't back off, we defend ourselves. That's vigilante justice, someone said nervously. No, Reverend Hayes said firmly. That's citizens protecting witnesses to federal crimes from assassination. There's a difference. The wait was excruciating. Men stamped their feet against the cold, checked their weapons, tried not to think too hard about what they'd signed up for. Abigail stayed despite Cal's protests, her rifle held with competent familiarity. I'm not leaving you to face this alone. Your daughters are safe with the Coopers, and they need to see their mother fight for what's right, not hide, while others do the dangerous work. Cal couldn't argue with that. Midnight came. Then, 1 in the morning. Men started to relax, to wonder if maybe Blackwood had decided the fight wasn't worth it. Then horses approached from 3 directions at once. Positions, Cal called. The riders came fast, at least 12 of them, more than expected. They pulled up just outside rifle range, and Dutch's voice carried across the cold night air. We're here on official territorial business. Judge Blackwood has issued warrants for the arrest of Sheriff Clayton Reed and Jack Brennan on charges of conspiracy and evidence tampering. Hand them over and nobody gets hurt. Show us the warrants, Hayes called back. Don't need to show you anything, preacher. This is the law. Funny kind of law that comes at midnight with a dozen armed men instead of one marshal with paperwork. Cal stepped forward. Tell the judge if he wants Reed and Brennan, he can come get them himself in daylight with proper documentation. Dutch laughed. You're making this harder than it needs to be. We're taking those men one way or another. Then you'll have to kill 23 people to do it, and I promise Dutch you won't survive the experience. The standoff held. Cal could see Dutch calculating odds, weighing the cost of a gunfight against the reward. 12 against 23 should have been easy math. But in darkness, with defensive positions and motivated defenders, the attackers would take heavy casualties even if they won. This ain't over, Dutch finally called. Judge Blackwood doesn't forget every man standing there tonight just marked himself. Good, someone shouted from Cal's side. Been waiting 15 years for someone to finally stand up. Tell the judge we're done being afraid. The riders withdrew slowly, maintaining the pretense of control. But everyone knew what had just happened. For the first time in 15 years, Judge Cyrus Blackwood had been successfully defied. We've got maybe 8 hours before the custody hearing, Hayes said as the tension broke. Everyone go home, get your families to safety, and meet at the courthouse at 9 tomorrow morning. We're going to see this through. Abigail leaned against Cal as the crowd dispersed. We won tonight. We survived tonight. Tomorrow's a different battle. Can we win it? Cal thought about the evidence in that metal box, about Reed's testimony and Brennan's witness statement, about Doc Finch's medical examination and the 23 men who'd just proven that Blackwood didn't control everyone. Maybe, if we're smart, if we're lucky, if Blackwood doesn't have one more card to play that we haven't seen yet. As if summoned by the words, hoofbeats approached a single rider moving fast. Cal raised his rifle, but the rider called out, "Don't shoot, message for Cal Mackenzie." The rider was young, maybe 16, and terrified. He handed Cal a folded paper without dismounting, then wheeled his horse and fled. Cal opened it. 5 words in elegant handwriting. Marshal Caldwell is in custody. Abigail read over his shoulder. What does that mean? Cal felt ice form in his stomach. It means Blackwood has the one federal officer who could have helped us, either bought him off or is holding him prisoner. Either way, we just lost our strongest potential ally. But we still have the evidence. Evidence that needs federal authority to mean anything in territorial court. Without Caldwell, we're back to convincing a corrupt judge to convict himself based on testimony from people he'll destroy the moment they step off the witness stand. They stood in the cold night, holding the message that changed everything. Around them, the church stood silent. Inside, men who just risked their lives wondered if it had been for nothing. Cal, Abigail said quietly, what do we do now? He looked at her, this woman who'd survived 18 months of hell with her spine straight and her children safe, who'd kissed him like she meant it, who trusted him to keep promises he wasn't sure he could keep. We do what we've been doing. We fight. We testify. We make Blackwood work for his victory. And if he tries to take your daughters... Cal's voice went hard. Then we remind him that some things are worth dying for. And killing for, if necessary. Abigail nodded slowly. Then let's make sure tomorrow he regrets ever threatening my family. They rode back to the Cooper homestead as dawn broke cold and gray. Inside, Lily and Rose slept in Rachel's best bed, temporarily safe. Outside Montana Territory held its breath, waiting to see if justice could survive when law itself had been corrupted. The custody hearing was 6 hours away. And Cal Mackenzie had no idea how to win a fight where the judge, the jury, and the entire system were stacked against them. But he'd figure something out. He had to. Because 2 little girls had asked God for someone brave, and Cal was finally learning what courage actually meant. Rose was already awake when they returned, pressed against the window watching for them. She ran out in her nightgown despite the cold, throwing herself at Abigail with desperate strength. "I thought you weren't coming back. I thought the bad men got you. We're here, baby. We're safe." Lily appeared in the doorway, her face carefully neutral. "Did you kill them? The men who burned our barn?" "Lily," Rachel's voice was sharp. "It's a fair question." Lily's eyes locked on Cal. "Did you?" "No. We stopped them without killing anyone." "Maybe you should have. Maybe then they'd stop coming." Cal knelt in front of her. "Killing should be the last choice, not the first. Your papa understood that. Papa's dead because he made the last choice too late." The brutal honesty from an 8-year-old hit harder than any accusation from an adult. Lily was right. Thomas had tried to do everything legally properly, and it had gotten him murdered. "You might be right," Cal admitted. "But your mama doesn't want you growing up thinking violence solves everything. Violence already solved everything. It just wasn't our violence." Abigail pulled Lily close despite her resistance. "The hearing is in 4 hours. After that, this will be over one way or another." "What if the judge says we have to leave you?" Rose's voice was tiny. "What if he takes us away?" "Then Mr. Cal keeps his promise and brings you home." "How?" Lily demanded. "How does he do that if the law says we belong to someone else?" Cal met Abigail's eyes over the girls' heads. They both knew the answer: through illegal means, through violence if necessary, through becoming the very thing they were trying to prove Blackwood was. But sometimes keeping children safe mattered more than staying on the right side of the law. "However, I have to," Cal said simply. Rachel insisted they eat breakfast, though nobody was hungry. The food tasted like ash, but they forced it down. Samuel cleaned weapons with quiet efficiency. Doc Finch arrived as they finished her medical bag packed. "You'll need this at the courthouse. Documentation of Thomas's real injuries. Photographs I took before Blackwood's men forced me to sign the death certificate." Abigail stared at the folder Doc Finch handed her. "You have photographs?" "I'm old, not stupid. I knew what I was seeing. I knew someday someone might have the courage to use the evidence properly." Doc Finch's weathered face was grim. "I just didn't think it would take 18 months. At 8:30, they loaded into wagons. Lily insisted on coming despite everyone's protests. "He's trying to take us away from Mama. We should be there to tell him no." "Lily, the courthouse isn't safe," Abigail started. "Nowhere's safe. The barn wasn't safe. The homestead wasn't safe. At least in the courthouse we can fight back with words instead of just hiding and hoping." Rose nodded, clutching her wooden horse. "I want to come too. I want to tell the judge that Mr. Cal is good, and Mama is good, and we don't want to leave." Cal looked at Abigail. This was her decision. "All right," Abigail said quietly. "But you stay with Rachel and Doc Finch. No matter what happens, you stay with them." The ride to town was tense. They weren't alone. Wagons and riders converged from every direction. Samuel had spread word well. By the time they reached the courthouse, at least 40 people had gathered in support. But Blackwood had prepared too. His supporters filled the courthouse steps, men in expensive suits, business owners who owed him money, officials who'd benefited from his corruption. Dutch and his hired guns stood at the entrance like sentries. "Big turnout," Cal said quietly. "He's making this a show of power." "Then we'd better make sure the show doesn't go how he planned." They dismounted. The crowd parted, some supportive, some hostile, most just curious. Cal kept the girls close, his hand near his gun. Dutch's eyes tracked them with undisguised menace. Sheriff Reed waited on the courthouse steps, looking like a man facing his own execution. Jack Brennan stood beside him, pale and shaking. "Ready?" Cal asked them. "No," Brennan said honestly. "But we're doing it anyway." Reverend Hayes appeared, moving through the crowd with quiet authority. "Mrs. Thornton, Mr. Mackenzie, the courtroom is packed. Standing room only. I've never seen this many people for a custody hearing." "That's because it's not really about custody," Abigail said. It's about whether this town belongs to Blackwood or to the people who actually live here. Inside the courtroom was stifling despite the cold outside. Bodies pressed together, breath steaming tension thick enough to choke on. Judge Cyrus Blackwood sat behind his bench like a king on a throne, his face showing supreme confidence. "All rise," the bailiff called. Unnecessarily, everyone was already standing. Blackwood's gaze swept the room, lingering on Cal, Abigail, and the girls. When he smiled, it didn't reach his eyes. "This is a territorial custody hearing regarding the minor children, Lily Marie Thornton and Rose Elizabeth Thornton. The territory has petitioned for removal of said children from their current guardian, Mrs. Abigail Thornton, on grounds of moral unfitness and inability to provide safe environment." His voice was smooth, practiced. "Mrs. Thornton, you may present your defense." Abigail stood, her hands clenched at her sides. "Your Honor, my daughters are well cared for, properly educated, and living in a loving home. Any suggestion otherwise is supported by evidence this court will now hear." Blackwood gestured to his attorney, a sleek man in an expensive suit. "Mr. Davidson will present the territory's case." Davidson stood with theatrical precision. "Your Honor, the territory will demonstrate that Mrs. Thornton has been cohabitating with a transient male of unknown character, creating an inappropriate environment for young children. Furthermore, her property has become the site of violence, arson, armed confrontation, and threats against community members. The children's welfare requires immediate removal to a stable home." "That's a lie," Lily's voice rang out. "The judge's men burned our barn." Blackwood's gavel cracked like gunfire. "Young lady, you will be silent or removed from this courtroom." "Lily, please," Abigail whispered urgently. "But Mama, he's lying. Everyone knows he's lying. Evidence will determine truth, not the opinions of children." Blackwood's tone was patronizing. "Mr. Davidson, your first witness." Davidson called Dutch to the stand. Cal's blood went cold as the hired thug swore an oath on a Bible he'd probably never read. "Mr. Dutch, have you observed conditions at the Thornton homestead?" "Yes, sir. I've been keeping watch, concerned for those little girls. Mrs. Thornton's been allowing strange men to stay overnight. This Mackenzie fellow, he's got no property, no visible means of support, and a violent past. I've seen him threaten law-abiding citizens, heard him make threats against Judge Blackwood himself." "That's a damn lie," Cal said flatly. Blackwood's gavel crashed again. "Mr. Mackenzie, another outburst and you'll be held in contempt." "Truth isn't contempt, Your Honor. That man burned our barn and threatened children. Now he's sitting there committing perjury." "Bailiff, remove Mr. Mackenzie from this courtroom." "No!" Abigail grabbed Cal's arm. "Please, Cal, don't." The bailiff approached, hand on his gun. The courtroom erupted, supporters shouting, Blackwood's people pushing back. Lily and Rose started crying. Reverend Hayes stood. "Your Honor, if you remove Mr. Mackenzie, you'll have to remove half this courtroom. He's speaking what everyone here knows to be true. This is my court, Reverend. I'll run it as I see fit. Then run it with justice instead of corruption." The gavel pounded repeatedly, but the chaos continued. Cal saw Dutch's hand drift toward his gun. He saw Blackwood's expression shift from confidence to fury. The situation was spiraling out of control. Then a voice cut through the noise like a blade. "This court is dismissed pending federal investigation." Everyone froze. At the back of the courtroom stood a man in his 50s, wearing a federal marshal's badge. Behind him were 4 more marshals, all armed, all looking like they meant business. "Who the hell are you?" Blackwood demanded. "Federal Marshal James Caldwell out of Denver. I'm here to execute arrest warrants for Judge Cyrus Blackwood on charges of conspiracy to defraud the United States government, murder, and systematic violation of federal land settlement law." The courtroom exploded again, but this time with shock rather than anger. Blackwood's face went white. "This is territorial jurisdiction. You have no authority here." "Actually, Your Honor, I have complete authority. Federal law supersedes territorial law when federal crimes are involved." Caldwell produced documents with official seals. These warrants were issued by Federal Judge Morrison in Cheyenne 3 days ago. 3 days? Cal stared. But the message said you were in custody. I was. In federal protective custody while Judge Morrison reviewed the evidence Thomas Thornton sent me 18 months ago. Caldwell's expression was grim. I apologize for the delay. Blackwood's connections reach high. It took time to build a case that couldn't be dismissed through political influence. Blackwood stood his hand, moving toward a drawer in his bench. This is illegal, I demand. Keep your hands visible, Your Honor. All 5 federal marshals had drawn weapons. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. You can't do this. I'm a territorial judge. I have immunity. You're a criminal who's been hiding behind a judge's robe. Immunity doesn't cover murder. Caldwell gestured to his men. Take him into custody. Dutch moved fast, his gun clearing leather. But Sheriff Reed was faster. He grabbed Dutch's gun hand, twisting hard. The weapon discharged into the ceiling, sending the courtroom into complete panic. Everybody down! Cal shouted, covering Lily and Rose with his body. More of Blackwood's men drew weapons. The federal marshals returned fire. The courthouse became a war zone in seconds, bullets flying, people screaming, bodies hitting the floor. Cal dragged the girls toward the side exit, Abigail right behind him. A bullet splintered the doorframe inches from his head. He shoved the girls through the door, turning back to provide cover. Reed and Dutch were fighting hand-to-hand, crashing through the courtroom. Blackwood tried to run, but Jack Brennan, terrified. Shaking Jack Brennan, tackled him from behind. That's for Thomas Thornton, you bastard. One of the federal marshals secured Blackwood, while the others subdued his remaining men. The gunfight was over in less than a minute, leaving the courtroom filled with smoke and the smell of cordite and shocked silence. Cal checked the girls frantically. Are you hurt? Either of you hit? They shook their heads, too traumatized to speak. Rose clutched her wooden horse so tight her knuckles were white. Lily's face was blank with shock. Abigail gathered them close, her whole body shaking. It's over. It's over. You're safe now. But Dutch wasn't finished. He broke free from Reed with desperate strength, his hand closing on a fallen gun. He swung it toward Abigail and the girls. Cal's rifle was up and firing before conscious thought. The shot took Dutch in the shoulder, spinning him around. He fell hard, the gun skittering away. The federal marshals secured him immediately. Reed stood over Dutch with his own gun drawn, his face showing satisfaction. That's for 18 months of watching you terrorize decent people. Marshal Caldwell surveyed the chaos, his expression showing professional weariness. Someone want to tell me why a custody hearing turned into a shootout? Because this was never about custody, Cal said. It was about power. About Blackwood trying to destroy anyone who challenged him. Caldwell nodded slowly. Mrs. Thornton, I owe you an apology. When your husband sent me that evidence 18 months ago, I should have acted immediately. But Blackwood had federal connections, judges, senators, territorial officials. I needed time to build a case that couldn't be buried through political pressure. Thomas is still dead, Abigail said quietly. 18 months of proper procedure doesn't change that. No, ma'am, it doesn't. But it means his death wasn't meaningless. The evidence he gathered has exposed a corruption network spanning 3 territories. We've identified 14 murders, hundreds of cases of land fraud and systematic abuse of judicial authority. Blackwood's going to federal prison for the rest of his life. And his men? Cal asked, watching Dutch being hauled away bleeding. Everyone involved faces federal charges. The hired guns, the complicit officials, the business owners who profited from stolen land. Everyone. Caldwell paused. Though I'll note that Sheriff Reed and Mr. Brennan's cooperation will be viewed favorably in any proceedings. Reed sagged against the wall, relief washing over his face. Brennan was crying openly, his shoulders shaking. What about the custody petition? Abigail asked, her voice steady, despite her trembling hands. Dismissed with prejudice. No legitimate court would separate these children from their mother. Caldwell smiled slightly. Though I'll recommend you formalize Mr. Mackenzie's presence through marriage or legal guardianship, just to prevent future questions. Abigail and Cal looked at each other. The moment stretched full of possibility and fear and hope. That's assuming Cal wants to stay, Abigail said carefully. That's assuming you want me to. Rose broke the tension by launching herself at Cal again. Please stay. Please be our papa, for real. Not just for Christmas. Lily hung back, her expression still guarded. Mama doesn't need a husband just to keep us. She's strong enough alone. I know she is, Cal said. That's not why I'd stay. Then why would you? Cal met Lily's challenging gaze. Because I'm tired of running. Because your mama makes me want to be better than I've been. And because you two girls asked God for someone brave. And I'm finally learning what that means. Lily's face crumpled. She ran to him crying for the first time since he'd met her. Cal held her while she sobbed, feeling his own eyes burn. I don't want to lose someone else, Lily whispered. I can't lose someone else. Then don't. Let me stay. Let me be part of this family. The courtroom was slowly emptying as federal marshals processed prisoners and townspeople filed out dazed by what they'd witnessed. Reverend Hayes approached with Samuel and Rachel Cooper. Mrs. Thornton, the church would be honored to host a wedding if such an event were being considered. Abigail laughed, slightly hysterical. Reverend, I'm covered in dust and gun smoke. My daughter's just witnessed a shootout, and you're talking about weddings? I'm talking about hope, Mrs. Thornton, about building futures instead of just surviving the present. Hayes smiled. This town needs reminders that good things can still happen here. He's right, Samuel said quietly. People need to see that Blackwood's reign is truly over. What better symbol than a wedding? Two people choosing hope despite everything they've suffered. Doc Finch joined them, her medical bag already open, as she checked the girls for injuries. For what it's worth, Abigail, I think you should marry the fool. He's stubborn enough to survive you, and God knows these girls need a father who won't leave them. I'm standing right here, Cal said. I know. I'm talking over your head on purpose. It's more fun that way. Doc Finch's weathered face was kind. Cal Mackenzie, you came here to die. These people taught you how to live. Don't waste that gift. Marshal Caldwell cleared his throat. Not to intrude on what's clearly a private moment becoming very public, but I need statements from everyone involved. Mrs. Thornton, Mr. Mackenzie, Sheriff Reed, Mr. Brennan, you're all material witnesses to federal crimes. This will take hours. Can we give statements tomorrow? Abigail asked. I need to take my daughters home, or what's left of home. Caldwell considered, then nodded. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock at Sheriff Reed's office. But Mrs. Thornton, you should know the homestead your husband claimed is legally yours. Clear title, no encumbrances. The Territorial Land Office has been ordered to correct all fraudulent survey records. You own every acre Thomas fought for. Abigail's knees buckled. Cal caught her holding her upright as she processed what that meant. Every acre, the mineral rights too. Everything. And there's more. Caldwell pulled out another document. The federal government is seizing all property acquired through Blackwood's fraud. That includes substantial assets that will be distributed to his victims as restitution. You're looking at significant compensation, Mrs. Thornton. Enough to rebuild your barn, and then some. Rose tugged at Caldwell's coat. Does that mean we can stay in our house? Nobody's going to make us leave? Nobody's going to make you leave, little one. That land is yours by right, and the United States government guarantees it. The weight of the last 18 months seemed to lift from Abigail's shoulders all at once. She sagged against Cal, laughing and crying simultaneously. We won. We actually won. You won, Cal corrected. You survived 18 months alone. I just showed up for the last fight. You showed up when it mattered most. They walked out of the courthouse into afternoon sunlight that felt warmer than it had any right to be. The crowd outside erupted in cheers when they saw Blackwood being loaded into a federal prison wagon in chains. Lily held Cal's hand on one side, Rose on the other. Abigail walked beside them, her spine straight and her head high. Around them, townspeople who'd been too afraid to speak out were finally finding their voices. Justice. About damn time. 3 cheers for Mrs. Thornton. But the celebration was interrupted by a gunshot. Everyone froze. Then Dutch's voice, weakened by blood loss, but still defiant, called out from the prison wagon. "This ain't over. Mackenzie Blackwood's got people you ain't even found yet. You think you're safe now? You just signed your death warrant." The federal marshals silenced him, but the words hung in the air like a curse. Cal felt Lily's hand tighten on his. "He's lying, right? It's really over. The judge is finished." But Dutch might be right. Blackwood's operation was big. There might be loose ends. Cal knelt so he could look both girls in the eye. "But here's what I promise you. I'm not going anywhere. Whatever comes next, we face it together. As a family." "Even if people try to hurt us again?" Rose asked. "Especially then." Marshal Caldwell joined them, his expression serious. "Mackenzie, I'll be honest. Dutch isn't wrong. Blackwood had partners we haven't identified yet. Business associates, corrupt officials, hired guns. Arresting him might flush them out. Then we'll deal with them when they come." "You sound pretty confident for a man who's outnumbered." "I'm not outnumbered." Cal gestured to the crowd surrounding them. "Look at all these people who finally found the courage to stand up. Blackwood spent 15 years building fear. We just proved fear can be beaten." Caldwell smiled slightly. "Fair point. All right, Mr. Mackenzie. Take your family home. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start the long process of documenting everything Blackwood destroyed. And rebuilding everything he tried to steal," Cal added. They loaded into wagons, exhausted but victorious. The ride back to the Cooper homestead felt different, lighter somehow, as if the weight they'd been carrying had finally been lifted. Rachel met them at the door with hot coffee and warm blankets. Samuel built up the fire. Doc Finch settled the girls by the hearth with their wooden horses, letting them process the day's trauma through play. "So," Rachel said as they sat around her kitchen table, "a wedding. When were you planning to tell us you were engaged?" Abigail nearly choked on her coffee. "We're not. We haven't." "Oh, don't be ridiculous. That man looks at you like you hung the moon. You look at him like he's the answer to prayers you were afraid to say out loud. And those girls need stability." Rachel's tone brooked no argument. "So, when's the wedding?" "Rachel, we just survived a shootout. Maybe we could have one day before planning life-changing events." Life-changing events are exactly what you need. Something positive to look forward to instead of just more violence and fear. Cal reached across the table, taking Abigail's hand. "She's got a point. You're agreeing with this insanity. I'm agreeing that waiting doesn't make sense. We both know what we want. Why pretend otherwise?" His thumb traced circles on her palm. "Abigail Thornton. I came to your fence line planning to die. You taught me how to live. Will you marry me?" "That's the least romantic proposal I've ever heard," Doc Finch muttered. "It's perfect," Abigail said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, yes, of course, yes." Lily appeared in the doorway, Rose right behind her. "Really? Mr. Cal's going to be our papa for real?" "For real," Abigail confirmed. Rose squealed and did a little dance. Lily's smile was more reserved but genuine. "Papa Thomas would have liked you," Lily said to Cal. "He always said the best people were the ones who chose to stay when they could have left." Cal felt his throat close completely. "I'll do my best to deserve that." "Good, because if you ever leave Mama and Rose crying, I'll track you down myself." "Lily!" Abigail gasped. "It's a fair threat," Cal said seriously. "And I accept it. If I ever hurt this family, Lily has full permission to come after me." Lily nodded, satisfied. Then she did something she'd never done before. She hugged him voluntarily, her small arms tight around his waist. "Thank you for keeping your promise," she whispered. "Thank you for being brave when we needed you." Outside, the Montana sun was setting, painting the snow in shades of gold and rose. Inside the Cooper homestead, two families became one through nothing more complicated than love and choice and the courage to hope again after loss. The battle with Blackwood was over, but the work of rebuilding the homestead, the town their lives, was just beginning. And for the first time in 4 years, Caleb Mackenzie was ready to stop running and start building something that mattered. Something worth protecting. Something worth staying for. A family. The wedding was set for 3 days later, which gave Dutch's warning plenty of time to fester. Cal spent those days rebuilding the barn with help from every able-bodied man in the territory. Samuel brought lumber. Reverend Hayes brought nails. Even Sheriff Reed showed up with a hammer, working alongside the man he'd nearly arrested. "Never thought I'd be building a barn for the family I helped hurt," Reed said quietly as they worked. "Then build it right. Make it count for something." The barn went up fast, better than the original, stronger. Lily helped measure boards while Rose painted the door with careful strokes. Abigail directed everything with the precision Thomas had taught her, and Cal found himself thinking about the man whose family he was inheriting. "You feel guilty," Abigail said that evening as they sat watching the girls play. "About Thomas." "I'm replacing a good man." "You're not replacing anyone. You're being someone different, someone new." She took his hand. "Thomas would have liked you. He always respected men who kept their word." "I keep thinking about what Lily said. That Thomas died because he chose law over violence too late. What if I make the same mistake? What if trying to do things right gets your daughters hurt? Then we'll deal with it together. But Cal, you can't live expecting the worst. That's just another kind of running." The words hit home. She was right. He'd spent 4 years preparing for loss instead of building toward hope. The next morning brought Marshal Caldwell with news that killed any remaining peace. He rode up to the construction site with federal marshals flanking him, faces grim. "We've got a problem. Blackwood's lawyer posted bail last night." Cal's hammer stopped mid-swing. "How federal charges don't get bail?" "They do when a territorial governor with connections signs off on it. Someone high up wants Blackwood free while we build the case." Caldwell's expression was thunderous. "He's restricted to Bozeman, but that puts him close enough to cause trouble." "Close enough to finish what he started," Reed said quietly. "Cyrus doesn't forgive. He's sitting in town right now planning revenge." Abigail stood from where she'd been helping Lily with measurements. "How long until trial?" 3 months minimum. Federal courts move slowly, and his lawyers are already filing motions to delay." Caldwell hesitated. "Mrs. Thornton, I need to be honest. The case is solid, but Blackwood's connections run deep. There's a chance he walks on technicalities." "Then what was the point?" Abigail's voice cracked. "What was the point of Thomas dying of 18 months of hell if that monster just walks free? The point is, we tried. The point is, people finally stood up. That matters even if..." Gunshots cracked from the direction of town. Everyone froze. Then more shots, rapid fire, echoing across the snow. Cal grabbed his rifle. "The girls. Get them to the root cellar, now." But before anyone could move, riders appeared, not Blackwood's men, but townspeople riding hard and fast. Jack Brennan led them, his face wild with fear. "Blackwood's men hit the church. They're trying to burn the evidence." Cal was moving before Brennan finished. He saddled his horse in seconds, checking his weapons with practiced speed. Sheriff Reed and Marshal Caldwell were right behind him. "Abigail, stay here with the girls. Doc Finch, you're armed?" "Always am." "Then keep this family safe. I'll be back." "Cal, wait." Abigail grabbed his arm. "Don't die being heroic. Those girls need you. I need you." He kissed her hard and fast. "Then I'll make sure I survive." The ride to town was desperate. Smoke rose from the church in thick columns. By the time they arrived, flames were already consuming the building where they'd stored Thomas's evidence. Reverend Hayes stood in front with a bucket brigade trying to save his church. Behind him, 3 of Blackwood's hired guns held the crowd back with drawn weapons. "Federal property," one shouted. "Judge Blackwood has the right to retrieve his personal documents." "Those documents are evidence in a federal investigation," Caldwell roared. "Stand down or face additional charges." "We got orders from the judge himself. Says his rights been violated, says he's taking back what's his." Cal's rifle came up. "The only thing Blackwood's taking is a bullet if you don't back off." The standoff held for a tense moment. Then someone in the crowd threw a rock. It hit one of Blackwood's men in the head, and everything exploded. The hired guns opened fire into the crowd. People scattered screaming. Cal shot the nearest one, dropping him clean. Reed took down another, but the third ran into the burning church. "He's going for the evidence," Brennan shouted. Cal didn't think. He dismounted and ran straight into the flames. The heat was tremendous, smoke choking. He could hear the building creaking, ready to collapse. The hired gun was at the altar where they'd stored the metal box. He grabbed it and turned, seeing Cal. Both men raised weapons simultaneously. Cal fired first. The man went down, but he'd already pulled his trigger. Cal felt the bullet tear through his left arm, spinning him around. He grabbed the metal box with his good hand and ran for the exit as timber crashed behind him. He burst out of the church entrance as the roof caved in. Hands grabbed him, pulled him clear. The world spun, and he realized he was lying in the snow, blood spreading from his arm. Abigail's face appeared above him. "You goddamn fool! I told you not to die being heroic." "I'm not dead yet." "Close enough. Doc Finch, he's bleeding bad." Doc Finch was already there, cutting away his sleeve with efficient brutality. "Bullet went clean through. You're lucky, Mackenzie. Another inch and it would have hit the artery." The pain hit, then sharp and burning. Cal gritted his teeth. "The evidence!" Marshal Caldwell held up the metal box, scorched but intact. "Got it. And the man you shot is alive. He'll testify about Blackwood ordering the fire." "Cyrus is finished then?" "Not yet," Reed said grimly. "He's holed up at his house with more men. Says he's not going back to custody. Says anyone who comes for him better be prepared to die." Cal tried to sit up. Failed. "How many men?" "At least 8. Maybe more. He's turned his house into a fortress." "Then we bring enough men to take it down." "Cal, you're in no condition," Abigail started. "I'm in perfect condition to finish this. We don't end it now, he'll keep coming. He'll wait until the wedding, until we're vulnerable, until he can hurt my daughters." Abigail's face hardened. "Then we end it. Tonight." "Mrs. Thornton, this is federal business now," Caldwell said. "We'll handle Blackwood." "With respect, Marshal, this became my business when he murdered my husband, when he tried to steal my children, when he spent 18 months making my life hell." She stood, rifle in hand. "I'm going. Try to stop me if you want, but I'm going." Lily stepped forward, her small face fierce. "Mama's right. This is our fight too." "Lily, no. You and Rose stay with Rachel. We're staying with Doc Finch at the church ruins, where we can watch." Lily's voice was steel. "Papa Thomas fought for our home. You're fighting for our home. The least we can do is witness it." Cal looked at this 8-year-old girl who'd grown up too fast. "Your papa would be proud of you." "Then don't die. He can't be proud if you're dead." Doc Finch finished bandaging Cal's arm with brutal efficiency. "You've got maybe 2 hours before shock sets in. Make them count." The plan came together fast. Caldwell's federal marshals would approach from the front, providing distraction. Reed and his volunteers would circle around back. Cal and Abigail would go through the side, targeting Blackwood specifically. "He'll have the best defensive position," Cal warned. "Upper floor probably. Good sight lines." "Then we use the one advantage we have," Abigail said. "He doesn't think I'm dangerous. He thinks I'm just a weak widow. That's his mistake." They moved through town as darkness fell. Citizens watched from windows, some praying, some just scared. This was the final confrontation. Either Blackwood fell, or everything they'd fought for died with him. Blackwood's house sat on its hill like a fortress. Lights burned in every window. Shadows moved inside armed men ready for siege. Marshal Caldwell called out from the road. "Judge Blackwood, you're under federal arrest. Surrender peacefully, and you'll face trial. Resist, and we'll take you by force." Blackwood's voice echoed from an upper window. "I am a duly appointed territorial judge. You have no authority to arrest me. This is persecution, not prosecution. Your bail has been revoked due to witness intimidation and destruction of evidence. Come out now." "Come get me, Marshal. I'll be waiting." The first shot came from an upper window kicking up snow near Caldwell's feet. The federal marshals returned fire, and the battle began. Cal and Abigail used the chaos to slip around the side. Cal's arm throbbed with each movement, but adrenaline kept him functional. They reached the kitchen door and found it unlocked. Arrogance or trap, Cal couldn't tell. Inside the house was opulent. Expensive furniture, imported rugs, crystal chandeliers, all bought with stolen land and murdered homesteaders. "Where would he be?" Abigail whispered. "Study probably. Upper floor corner room with the best view." They crept through the house, weapons ready. Gunfire echoed from the front, but the interior was eerily quiet. Too quiet. Then Cal heard it breathing just ahead in the shadows. "Now!" someone shouted. 3 men rushed them from side rooms. Cal got one, but his wounded arm slowed him. The second man grabbed Abigail, slamming her against the wall. Her rifle clattered away. Cal shot the man holding Abigail, but the third tackled him. They crashed through a doorway into what looked like a sitting room. The man was huge, easily 50 pounds heavier, and Cal's injured arm was useless. The man's hands closed around Cal's throat. "You should have kept writing, cowboy. Should have let the widow handle her own problems." Cal's vision started to blur. He fumbled for his knife with his good hand, found it, drove it upward with desperate strength. The man gasped and fell away. Cal dragged himself up, coughing and bleeding and barely standing. Abigail was already moving toward the stairs. "He's up there. I can feel him." They climbed together, each step an effort. At the top, a door stood open, the study, just as Cal had guessed. And inside, Judge Cyrus Blackwood sat behind a massive desk, a bottle of whiskey in one hand and a revolver in the other. "Mrs. Thornton," he said pleasantly, as if they'd met at a church social. "And the faithful cowboy. Come to execute me, have you?" "Come to see justice done," Abigail said. "Justice." Blackwood laughed. "You think federal courts care about justice? They care about politics, influence, money. All things I have in abundance." He poured another drink with steady hands. "I'll never see the inside of a prison, my dear. Too many powerful people owe me favors." "You killed my husband." "I did. He was nosing around where he didn't belong, threatening to expose ventures that benefit far more important people than you." Blackwood's smile was cold. "Thomas died quickly, at least. That's more mercy than I'm required to show." Abigail raised her rifle. "You're not walking away from this." "Neither are you. My men have orders. If I die, they kill everyone you love. Your daughters, your friends, everyone who stood against me. Is one corrupt judge worth all those lives?" The trap was elegant. Kill Blackwood, and everyone Cal cared about died in retaliation. Let him live, and he'd wriggle free through lawyers and connections and political influence. "There's a third option," Cal said quietly. "Oh, do tell." "You confess. Everything. Every murder, every stolen acre, every official you've bribed. Full confession, witnessed and recorded. In exchange, your men stand down, and you get life in prison instead of hanging." Blackwood laughed again. "Why would I agree to that?" "Because the alternative is Abigail shoots you right now, and we kill every single one of your men before they can hurt anyone. You die tonight either way. Question is whether you take a dozen men with you." The calculation played across Blackwood's face. He was cornered but too arrogant to admit defeat. "You're bluffing. You don't have the stomach for massacre. Try me, Abigail said. Her rifle never wavered. I watched you destroy my life for 18 months. Killing you would be easy. Marshal Caldwell's voice called from downstairs. Blackwood, your men are surrendering. It's over. Blackwood's confidence finally cracked. You're lying. Check for yourself. He stumbled to the window. Below, his hired guns were throwing down weapons, surrounded by federal marshals. The siege was over and he'd lost. No, Blackwood whispered. No, this isn't. I had lawyers' connections guarantees. You had fear, Cal said. But fear only works until people find something worth being brave for. You forgot that. Blackwood turned his revolver swinging toward Abigail. Then I'll take you with me. Cal's shot took him in the shoulder, spinning him around. The revolver fell from nerveless fingers. Blackwood collapsed against his desk, bleeding and finally beaten. That's for Thomas Thornton, Cal said quietly, and every other person you destroyed. Marshal Caldwell burst in with federal marshals. They secured Blackwood, who was crying now, his facade completely shattered. I'm a judge, he sobbed. I'm a territorial judge. You can't do this to me. You were a judge, Caldwell corrected. Now you're just a criminal facing justice. Finally. They led him away, still crying. The great Judge Cyrus Blackwood reduced to a broken man in chains. Abigail lowered her rifle with shaking hands. It's over. It's really over. Cal pulled her close with his good arm. It's over. They walked out of that house of corruption into clean night air. The town was celebrating. Citizens who'd been too afraid to speak were finally shouting their joy. Reverend Hayes led prayers of thanksgiving. Samuel and Rachel held each other weeping. And at the church ruins, Lily and Rose waited with Doc Finch. When they saw Cal and Abigail, both girls ran. You came back? Rose threw herself at Cal. You promised, and you came back. Lily followed more slowly, but her relief was just as profound. Is he really gone? The judge. He's gone, Lily. He can't hurt anyone anymore. Good. Lily's face showed satisfaction beyond her years. Papa can rest now. The wedding happened 2 days later in the ruins of the burned church. Reverend Hayes said new things should grow from the ashes of old destruction. The whole territory came to witness. Lily and Rose stood as flower girls wearing new dresses Rachel had sewn from saved fabric. They scattered winter berries instead of flowers, their faces bright with uncomplicated joy. Cal stood at the makeshift altar in clothes borrowed from Samuel, his left arm in a sling but his heart full. When Abigail appeared walking alone because no one could replace her father, his breath caught. She wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit. Simple white cotton that had seen better days, but she wore it with such dignity that it looked like royalty. Reverend Hayes performed the ceremony with tears in his eyes. These two people have walked through fire. They've lost everything and found each other. They've chosen hope when despair would have been easier. His voice strengthened. Caleb Mackenzie, do you take Abigail Thornton as your wife to love and protect, forsaking all others? I do. Abigail Thornton, do you take Caleb Mackenzie as your husband to love and support, forsaking all others? I do. Then by the authority vested in me by God and Montana Territory, I pronounce you husband and wife. Cal, you may kiss your bride. He did, and the crowd erupted in cheers. Rose danced. Lily actually smiled, really smiled for the first time since Cal had met her. The celebration lasted hours. Doc Finch provided whiskey. Jack Brennan brought food. Sheriff Reed gave them his blessing and a promise to keep the territory safe. Marshal Caldwell presented them with the deed to their homestead, clear title, no encumbrances, certified by federal authority. This land is yours, Caldwell said, bought with Thomas Thornton's blood and your courage. No one can take it from you ever again. As evening fell, they returned to the homestead. The new barn stood solid and strong. The cabin glowed with warmth. The fence Cal had repaired on Christmas morning held firm against wind and snow. Inside, they tucked the girls into bed. Rose fell asleep immediately, her wooden horse clutched tight. Lily stayed awake longer, her eyes serious. "Cal, can I call you Papa now, or would that hurt Papa Thomas's memory?" Cal knelt beside her bed. "Your Papa Thomas will always be your Papa. Nothing changes that. But if you want to call me Papa too, I'd be honored." "Then good night, Papa Cal." "Good night, Lily." He kissed her forehead, and she was asleep before he reached the door. Abigail waited by the fire, her wedding dress exchanged for a simple nightgown. When Cal sat beside her, she leaned into him with complete trust. "I keep expecting someone to tell me this isn't real, that I'll wake up and you'll be gone, and the judge will still be circling like a vulture. It's real. I'm real. This is happening. How did we get here? From Christmas morning, desperation to this." Cal thought about two little girls at a fence line asking a stranger to be their father. About a woman who'd survived 18 months of hell with her dignity intact. About finding courage when courage seemed impossible. We got here by choosing to stay when running would have been easier. By choosing to fight when surrender would have been safer. By choosing to hope when hope was the most dangerous thing in the world. And now we build. We raise your daughters. We work this land. We make Thomas's sacrifice mean something by living well. Abigail turned to face him fully. Cal Mackenzie, formerly a broken man running from ghosts, now a husband and father. How does it feel? Terrifying and perfect, and exactly where I'm supposed to be. She kissed him, then soft and deep and full of promise. Outside Montana, wind sang through the fence rails. The barn stood solid against the cold. The land stretched endlessly toward mountains painted silver by moonlight. Somewhere in Cheyenne, Judge Cyrus Blackwood sat in federal custody, his empire of corruption destroyed. In Bozeman, citizens who'd been silent for 15 years were finding their voices. In territories across the West, homesteaders who'd lost land to fraud were getting their property returned. But here in this cabin that Thomas built and Cal defended, and Abigail made into a home, 4 people had become a family through nothing more complicated than courage and choice, and love that chose to stay, despite every reason to run. Cal wrapped his good arm around his wife, feeling the weight of new responsibility settle across his shoulders, like a mantle he'd finally earned the right to wear. A man could ride 1,000 miles to escape his past and never find peace. Or he could stand his ground at a fence line where 2 little girls prayed for someone brave and discover that courage wasn't about never being afraid, it was about loving something enough to face fear anyway. 4 years of running ended by 3 words spoken on Christmas morning: "Be our daddy." Cal had arrived at that fence line expecting to die. Instead, he'd learned how to live. And that he decided as sleep finally claimed him made all the difference.